Hi, everybody. It's Maven. Welcome to When We Choose. We cover issues all along the spectrum, really around the ideas of consent and bodily autonomy. But broadly, that ends up going into a lot of social and family issues. And my guest today is Jenny from the channel Life Take Two.
Thanks so much, Maven, for having me. I'm Jenny Gage of Life Take Two, where I share my firsthand insider experience from within the Mormon Church. And I like to say I share my harrowing escape from Mormon trad wife life. You can find me over on YouTube, TikTok, and my favorite thing is my Substack, which is under the pen name Life Take Two. And I'm currently working on a series called Churchified.
Thank you so much. And we'll have links down in the description below to check her out. Thank you so much for coming on my show. So, what we have here today are two feminists, one a divorced former trad wife, and the other a never married, childless woman. And we're going to discuss how to do trad wife better. Between our different life experiences, I think we have data and information to back up why we think we can help make trad wifery better for those who want to choose that as a lifestyle. So I prepared this real quick, just a really, really quick overview of the trad wife lifestyle in general, the tenets that it kind of follows. So it's strict gender roles. I have co-equal in quotations here because it's often used to describe the relationship between men and women as complementary, but really at the basis of this movement is the idea that women are submissive to their husbands. And I know, at least in Mormonism, where Jenny and I both come from Mormon backgrounds, the church does a lot to try to minimize that kind of harsh language. I feel like submit is not used very much anymore, but the like temple covenants we make in a marriage, well, not even in a marriage ceremony, because as I still made this covenant to like a non-existent husband for me, but it was that when I got a husband, I would hearken to him, which is just a kind of a softer way to say obey, which is what it used to be anyway. So whether or not they'll use the term strongly submit, I think that is ultimately what's here as well. Jenny, do you have anything to add or say about that?
I absolutely always thought that I needed to learn how to submit better. So that word didn't have a negative connotation to me. When I went through the temple as a 20-year-old girl in preparation for my temple wedding, I took all kinds of different oaths and covenants from the initiatory and then the endowment and then my wedding itself that I would obey and submit to my husband. And I absolutely didn't think that that was negative at all because I felt that Heavenly Father had created me as a submissive helpmeet. So like that word never never raised any red flags in me. I thought that that was the ideal. That's how Heavenly
That's
Father made.
interesting. 'Cause I was very conservative minded and, absolutely, like, in the sauce that I was in. But even young, I didn't like the word submit because I felt the power imbalance inherently there in that. Um, but I did feel like the whole help meet, that sounds better than, like, servant or you know what I mean? So, I wanted to have my cake and eat it too, I guess. I believed in it, but I liked the softer wording, and that was important to me. Okay. So back to the slides. All right. The second thing I have here is focus on marriage and motherhood. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Number three, I have homemaking. I've got food, cleanliness, haven, shelter basically is where that falls under. So the trad wife, generally it's home cooked meals for the kids. It's decorating the home, making it a comfortable and warm and welcoming place. All very, very good things. The fourth tenet I have is biblical womanhood. This is often very much tied to religion. Of course, there's always exceptions, and you don't have to be religious, but at least in the United States, it's very much based on, yeah, biblical kind of type teachings and conservative Christian teachings. And so there's just a lot about kind of elegance and purity and modesty and just all of the really, I think, soft forms of feminism that are associated with women. And the last thing I put in here is trust in divine providence. I think you'll agree with me, Jenny, that almost everything that we were taught to on how to do and how to be, there was this element of faith in God and trusting in him to provide. So especially when you're looking at having only one income and a wife staying at home, finances is obviously going to be a concern. And I think the most common one that's covered with this idea of like have faith in God and he will provide for your family. Well, actually that and childbirth. Like if you feel like you can't handle more kids, like God only gives you what you can handle. So it's just kind of up to you to just do your part and then assume that God will fill in the gaps that you feel like personally you can't fail or you can't fill or measure up to yourself.
Maybe
Right?
that's a really important point that you just brought up. And for anybody who maybe doesn't understand what a trad wife is or care about it or isn't living this lifestyle themselves, a lot of people around the world read the Ballerina Farm article by Megan Agnew. And there's a little part in there where Hannah and Daniel are kind of dialoguing back and forth about the number of kids that they have. You know, we have 8 children now. And I don't remember if the question was asked, might you have more in the future? But they kind of talk about God is our birth control. Like it's in the Lord's hands. We've given this to Heavenly Father, how many children we have. In every aspect of my life as a traditional wife, I felt like Heavenly Father had a plan for my life. I felt like He knew better than I did how many children I needed, whether or not I should have a job, like, what things I should be doing in my life. I was just trying to tune into through like warm vibes, fuzzy feelings, saying my prayers, having the Holy Ghost, what Heavenly Father wanted for my life, and then just obey. So I would never really look at the number of children I had from scientific, like mathematical perspective of how much money do we make, how many bedrooms do we have, how many kids can I actually take care of, and look at my parenting capacity. I would pray about, does Heavenly Father want me to have another baby? Does Heavenly Father want me to have 2 more babies, 3 more babies? What does Heavenly Father want me to have? And every aspect of my life, especially my birth control, was in Heavenly Father's hands, just like Hannah Nealon talked about in that article.
Yeah, I had the same kind of idea that I can't trust my own feelings or my own interests or my own internal compass. I was also always looking for what does God want me to do, and whether or not it's something that I wanted to do or not really seemed secondary. And even if it seemed like this looks really miserable to me, if God wants it for me, I would think that I would eventually be happy in it. So I would be fine. Really, and I did. I think we all have in some ways just given up some really important parts of ourselves for the idea of what God wants for us, often coming from external sources. All right.
Yeah, and then when life is miserable and hard, well, Heavenly Father is just testing us. Heavenly Father's plan is hard. It's not easy.
Right. Or you're doing something wrong to mess it up. There's no end of ways that when this lifestyle falls through for people, that you will be blamed for it as having done something fundamentally wrong. And this is kind of what we're going to talk about next is the yeah, what is it that we're told that we're going to get from it and how we're going to benefit from it versus what the reality is. I'll go through the four just real quick. So I've listed stability and security, a stronger marriage, fulfillment and joy, and no work stress. So let's go to number one. All right, stability and security. So again, these are the promises of the movement. We'll kind of deconstruct these a little bit later, but the idea is that you're getting financial security through a provider. You've got a husband who's working and he's taking care of you. And yeah, so you get that. You also have a physical protector that is often in line with provide and protect. I see that all the time in traditional circles like ours, but also like evangelicalism. And then also that there's this emotional support through marriage, that you have this partner that you're really kind of a team. And that kind of also plays into the stronger marriage part too. But Jenny, I'll give it to you to add anything on number one.
As a woman growing up in a home where I was very much focused on being a trad wife when I got older, I didn't know how to go out and get a job and provide for myself. I hadn't been given any leadership skills. I didn't have a very good education. I dropped out of college 2 years in, and I saw no path forward in life to being able to provide for myself. How was I going to buy a house? How was I going to pay for a car? How was I going to do anything as a woman? So for me, I felt like it would be easier to marry a man who's going to take care of me than to figure out how to create a whole entire life for myself. And that was probably one of the biggest, I guess, benefits that I was sold. And then as I'm on social media and I hear from young women today I had a follower a couple months back who told me it's easier to marry a millionaire than to become a millionaire. So I want to be a trad wife. I want to be a trad girlfriend. I'd way rather have a man take care of me than, work out there and compete against men in the workplace when we really don't have the skills or the example of how to do that. So that's,
Or
I think,
opportunities sometimes.
yeah, we
It's
don't
tougher.
have the opportunities. And a lot of us haven't seen it role modeled because still today, a lot of our moms were stay at home moms or they were underemployed. They had just, like part time jobs, things like that. So many of us don't have the example of the moms who were providers at all. And then there's
Yeah.
some of the younger generations whose moms were boss moms and they have just the opposite where they were out there working like 60, 70-hour weeks and they were stressed out and they hated it. So those young girls in my TikTok and my YouTube comments are like, it looks terrible. Now I want to be a
Yeah.
trad wife because I saw my mom being the boss mom. So for many of us who fall in love, let that man put the ring on it, and we decide that we're going to be the stay-at-home moms, I think that first and foremost, that's the most alluring thing, that I can do everything else inside the home and he's going to financially provide for me. And we're all sold that that's foolproof, right?
Right. And we're not encouraged as girls to be thinking about careers and earning money really. And so and I'm even thinking just the disparity between like the teen programs between the girls and the boys that for me it was the scout program or for boys it was the scout program when I was growing up. So they were learning a lot of skills and making all kinds of connections and doing all sorts of things whereas my side was definitely a lot more domestic and not as varied. They're not looking, yeah, to give us a lot of or ideas of careers that we might like. That's just because we're not supposed to really get them. And so it does seem easier, I think mentally and just trying to plan for the future if you don't have to come up with a career and figure that stuff out about yourself. So yeah, that's brilliant. It makes a
Our
lot of
side
sense.
is trad
Easier
wife
to
training.
marry one for sure. Okay. Do you want to read the number two?
Sure. So we have stronger marriage is number two. And really, like, this is sold to us as the way to have a stronger marriage. And I know that when you get married, you don't know exactly how you're going to keep that spark alive for your whole entire life. So when you have these role models that we've already seen live what we think are happy marriages, then of course we want the strongest marriage we can. So that's one of the big allures of trad wife life. Those traditional things make us stronger. So submission and co-equal roles. And I love that you put the co-equal in quotes because co-equal, that very word means we're not really equal, but we both have like equal work within the household, and we'll get into those gender roles a little bit later. Um, Connection and romance and fidelity. I think especially coming from a dating life, like coming from like my teen years in college and looking at, oh, when I get married, when I go through the temple and now I have my eternal companion, I have my forever partner, then I no longer have to worry about relationships ending, falling out of love. The romance is going to be eternal now because we went through the temple and said I do. Like somehow we have that assurance that marriage is going to make all of that stuff permanent. It's going to stick now.
Yeah, we've got our ride or die person. Yeah. All right, I'll go ahead and read number three, the fulfillment and joy. We're often taught that our purpose and identity is through marriage, through motherhood, and homemaking. It's a very nurturing family kind of role, bonding with children. It's 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 very nice and very human sounding, I think. And then homemaking as a creative outlet. There's a lot of ways that women can express themselves through talents, through either sewing, clothing, or if it's cooking. And these are all things we all need to eat. So becoming good and creative at that aspect has a lot of benefits, I think, as far as health and nutrition goes. And then, of course, with the homemaking, making the home a welcoming and comforting like place that everybody wants that. And it's nice to be able to have your own space to make the decision because you don't get that growing up. It's all your parents, right? So when you've got your own place, then you can make it have kind of whatever atmosphere or vibe seems to really fill you up and help your family.
I think the homemaking as a creative outlet was again one of my biggest lures into trad wife life because yeah, growing up you have so he's going to provide for me financially, and then because I don't have to wake up in the morning and like get dressed and go out the door to an office or something, I have all day, every day that I can scrapbook and do crafts and sew Halloween costumes for my kids and do all these fancy birthday parties and all that stuff because I have his bank account that's bankrolling everything. And I have literally endless time. Like my whole entire schedule was my schedule. Of course, that revolved around babies and kids'
Right.
schedules and things like that. But I was in the home for large blocks of time, and I'm very creative and artsy crafty. And it was definitely one of the biggest perks for me in Tradwife life was all of the time that I had to craft and create and decorate and build houses and do fancy hairdos for my girls. Like
Yeah.
now, I'm parenting on the other side, of course, and I wouldn't have time to spend an hour if I was getting myself ready for work while getting the kids ready to go out the door to school.
Mhm.
I couldn't do two little girls' fancy hairdos and iron their dresses and get all the jewelry on them and do homemade pancakes for breakfast. Like I just simply wouldn't have time to do that if I was also working. But because I was completely home based, we had gourmet breakfast every morning and
With the toast and the orange juice, like in the whole movie setup, right? And it's
when we had
variety
orange trees,
too.
so I would walk outside to the orange trees. I would pick the
Oh,
oranges. In one home, we had 44 citrus trees, so I would pick the oranges, juice the oranges, grind the wheat, make the bread. I had time to do all that. It was great. It was one of the biggest perks. Agreed.
I'll read number 4, the no work stress. We did talk about this kind of in the stability and security section. The refuge from modern pressures, from those soulless grinding jobs or, thankless ones, the ones that are really difficult, retail, and a lot of times they're very low paid work. So it's hard work for low pay and low appreciation. The idea is that we can avoid burnout, like you were saying, that you wouldn't be able to do all the things that you were able to do, setting up the day if you had to also go to work. Um, I thought that I was told that it would be better for our mental health, that feminism has done this really terrible thing to women and made them all unhappy. And it's because of the work life balance was out of whack. And yeah, and that by not having work, yeah, better focus and energy on family, like you said. These are the next set of benefits. I'll read them through real quick. We've got religious morals, feminine empowerment, community, and simplicity. um, Jenny, do you want to go ahead and read number 5? Spell that out.
Yeah, so we have spiritual fulfillment, that divine favor, protection, and blessings by obedience and faith in God, and moral clarity and simplicity. I think that, again, one of the biggest allures to me of the trad wife life was I was coming from a Mormon background where I believed that marriage almost had this magical power of protection from Heavenly Father. And I didn't think that I could get that in any other way. So once I went through the temple and I had the temple endowment and I had my Mormons and I was married to a man, I was fulfilling Heavenly Father's like literal reason why he created me. I almost felt invincible. Like I am now protected because I've been righteous and I've done everything that Heavenly Father wants me to do. I am now like sacredly set apart as a wife and a mother in Zion. And so that's going to come with its own special protections. I believed that as a mother, when I said my prayers, that like they had more weight, that my righteousness was going to like give me special favor and power in the world. And honestly, like I would say this little line sometimes jokingly, but I really meant it. Like, I feel like mothers automatically are going to go to the top of the celestial kingdom because of everything we sacrificed. And the more children I had, the more time I spent raising children, I really, really believed that just because I had sacrificed so much of my life, like I knew that I was going to be in the celestial kingdom with Heavenly Father because I was a mom, because of everything that I'd done in my home and for my husband. Like that was my ticket to heaven right there.
Makes sense. Yeah. I think that in my family, we've struggled financially, and so my mom did have to work outside of the home. And I believed in this divine favor so much that God blesses his children for following his commandments. And first of all, I thought a lot of the blessings from commandments were just kind of inherent, just God knew the right way for people to act to have the best outcome in life, but that also when things out of our control happened, God would be kind of coming in to fill in the gaps. So that invincibility is a good way to put it. I think that you do feel like there's this extra measure to fill up if something is missing. But I remember thinking that we struggled, that part of the reason was because my mom was going to work, and that my parents together didn't have enough faith to trust in God to help us, and that's why my mom was working. So I genuinely thought if my mom and dad both had more faith and she quit her job and stayed home, God would bless us to be less poor. I thought it would be like maybe my dad would get a different job, but he's not getting it, again, because of this lack of righteousness and obedience. So he's struggling in this job now. But again, just if my mom would just quit, then either that or a promotion, or some other thing, or maybe reducing expenses. Maybe we'll get less sick in the home in, kind of intangible ways, but just, God is all powerful. So he could do all of these things in order to make our family better. But I do remember thinking that my parents were losing divine protection and help with finances and just the tiredness and the stresses of life because they weren't fully in enough and having enough faith. So let me
Can I
get this.
just
Yeah.
piggyback off of that really quickly for like less than a minute? I don't know if we've talked about you and I together, but the day that I became a trad wife was very unexpected. My husband and I had actually bought a business together, and I was running the business, doing everything, and then he would go out and do the installs. So I worked primarily from home. I was able to just be in my home office. I had nannies come in and take care of my son. And then one Sunday, we had to go renew our temple recommends with the stake president. We'd already had the bishop sign off. We go to the stake president. We sit down with our stake president in 1998, and the stake president just asked me, making conversation, I don't know you guys very well. You're kind of, newlyweds and you're new to our stake. What do you like to do all day, Sister Green? And I told him, what do I like to do all day? I run our windshield business. I work about 50, 60 hours a week, and that's what I do all day. And our stake president, the family proclamation had just come out a couple years before. He looks me dead in the eyes and he says, Sister Green, do you know the family proclamation? Have you read it? Are you aware of it? Do you know that you are commanded to stay home with your children, that you are to nurture? That is the divinely appointed role that Heavenly Father created you for. And you're telling me that you're working. So he spent some time in conversation. I don't remember everything he said, obviously 1998, it's been a little while. But I remember one little thing. He's like, you have all of these blessings that Heavenly Father wants to give you that are going to be blocked if you continue to work. And one of the things he said is, statistically, you're more likely for your little baby son to get onto drugs later in life if you go outside and work, because you're not going to have that protection by Heavenly Father. Heavenly Father will protect your son if you don't work. Basically, if you continue working for your own business, your little toddler here is going to be a druggie later in life. And he called my husband into his office and he said, I want you guys to talk this week about phasing Sister Green out of the business so that she's not working at all, so she can just focus on your little son and then having more babies. And if you do this, Heavenly Father will bless both of you individually. He'll bless your children and he will bless your business. You guys will be more successful than ever because she's not working for the business anymore. If you continue having her work, the business is going to fail. So 1 week later, my husband just was kind of like, okay, I guess you can't work anymore. He hired my sister and then some other people to replace me. And that was the day that I became a trad wife. So our stake president, quoting scripture and the family proclamation, directly told me, if you continue working, you're not going to have those blessings. So everything that you felt as a child, that is Mormon doctrine. That's still what bishops and leaders are teaching people today. And I hear from a lot of young women around the world who really feel that by obeying Heavenly Father's command to stay home, they will have these magic blessings.
Right. And we trust that. It was something as a point of pride that we're faithful, that we love God, that we want to obey him, and yeah, there's kind of seen as a privilege to be able to have this resource, have him as a resource for these kinds of situations. So, yep. Um Number 6 was feminine empowerment, and I think this is important because there's just a lot of ways in a patriarchal system that it sucks to be a girl a lot of times. Just growing up, there are a lot of things that are really different. There's a double standard for us, and there's just a lot of ways that feminine things are seen as weak or less than. So that's what you get in sports. If you throw like a girl, or if you're weak like a girl, it's just kind of this idea of weakness. And so I feel I think this is kind of a draw to kind of counteract that. Even um yeah, that it's a celebration of femininity and elegance, and that it's you have this really important special role, especially as it comes to childbirth, because that's something absolutely men cannot do. And so that's like our special thing, our special power, that that's we can be happy to be women and proud to be women. That was sold to me. And also motherhood as this distinct and honored family role. There, at least for Mormonism, I know there were a lot of quotes from prophets growing up that would say things more or less like that. Um, Women who get the kind of worldly accolades are fine and great, but women who are mothers like will be revered for generations, and it was just like way higher than anything else that you could possibly do, even in a meaningful career. Comments, Jenny?
I There's nothing that I could say that would be any better than everything you've just said. All of that, 100%. So
Perfect.
great.
I'll have you read the next one then, number 7.
Okay, community, cultural connection through traditions, support networks, and proven methods for success. With that cultural connection through traditions, all three of these I think are really important, and they are some of the structures that keep women in these traditional family models and also scare them out of ever trying to go out on their own and do anything else, like not get married or, I don't know, structure their families any differently. That cultural connection through traditions, I felt so tied into this huge family. In fact, I grabbed a photo before we came on today of my big extended family and my great grandmothers, all of my aunts, my grandma. I'm like a 4-year-old girl down here. I had seen, and as humans, we're subconscious dominant. So we're not always just absolutely um, like using our brains to figure out, hey, I'm going to do exactly what my mom did and exactly what my grandma did. But we are subconscious dominant. So we are picking up through osmosis the behaviors of the tribe around us. And it's very comfortable for us to model out that behavior that we've seen. So as I became a young adult and was looking at what do I want to do with my future, the most comfortable option for me was just acting out what I had seen my mom do and what I had seen my grandma do and what I had seen my great grandma do. And that's get married and have babies and have a little house and decorate and bake bread. And that cultural connection is so strong. It feels like you're home when you're doing exactly what everybody else has done. And certainly within these stay at home mom groups, there are a lot of networks, especially if you're part of a religious organization. The Mormon church, I think, definitely provides more than some of the other religions where you have just like mega churches that are a little bit smaller. Being part of like the Mormon stay-at-home mom tribe, there were always homemakings to go to and other moms that wanted to do play dates and different things like that. And it ties you in so much, and you don't have to invent the wheel as far as marriage and family. I knew instinctively, like, these are what past traditions have done. This is how my mom handled nap time and how my mom did play dates and how my mom did dinners and what my mom and dad did in their marriage. I was able to pattern my whole entire life off of a proven successful model. But ironically, Maven, like it wasn't successful for my mom or my grandmas or anybody, but it seemed like it was.
And the other side of things, I know this is because I still get this messaging as someone who didn't marry and didn't have children, is this idea that you will be alone. If you do not get married, if you don't have kids, you're going to die miserable and old and lonely. And so there's just this idea. First of all, that I find a bit not a bit, but a lot distasteful, is this idea of children as a retirement plan. And I think that could probably go into your slogan as well, like a man is not a plan and children are
Yeah.
not a retirement plan, right? But yeah, and I think it really diminishes the idea that we can
Mhm.
make relationships anyway, that they don't have to necessarily be inbuilt to family. And I feel like I actually have been blessed to have a lot of relationships with children, either through like my family's, my brother's children or my friends' children, and I enjoy that time with them. I enjoy being around them. I've worked with children in a school setting and also in a nonprofit setting briefly. So yeah, this idea that there's this inherent loneliness. And yeah, maybe those children aren't going to take care of me when I'm at the point where I'm old and lonely and miserable. But there's no guarantee that your children will either. And I think we're actually seeing more and more when there's um, real family differences and growing resentment about how children were raised. Adults are estranging from parents a lot more often, and so um, yeah, I think just this idea that you only have support with a family and that you don't have without just isn't always true. But that's the promise, and that's what we're sold on if we're going back to the list, is that, that we've always got people around us, and human beings need people. And so yeah, to have that in there was really great. And I think I don't know how much you moved around, Jenny, but I was an army brat, so I moved around a lot. And so it was kind of also nice and easy mode, really, to move into a new community, to just find the next Mormon ward, what ward you were part of geographically, and then you plug in, and you don't have to do a lot of work to build a social network. And it is difficult, and people do struggle with that outside of religion, but it can be done. It takes some footwork, to do, but it's already there for you in the trad wife culture. Whose turn is
Ready-made.
it? My turn to Oh,
Your
did you
turn.
want to have another?
No, it's just, yeah, it's just ready-made, like you belong. That's the allure of cults. And
Yeah.
yeah, in the trad wife life, like you have that commonality with other women that, yeah, that's it.
Okay. Yeah, this one kind of goes back to this idea of simplicity, being less worldly, going back to nature's basics. You've got your gardening. It's the hands-on homesteading, home cooking, useful skills, less consumerism, less just keeping up with the Joneses, and focus on things that don't matter for things that do matter. And for me, that was a very attractive idea for me as well. Any thoughts on that?
I think that this is one of the big components that all of the online trad wives are really pushing. Like we watch their content, you watch Ballerina Farm, and it's just so simple. She's in her little pajamas in the kitchen, making some bread, making eggs, and it's just so very simple. These are times that we think we understand how easy it was to just farm and families making sense. And as human beings, we're always like trying to mitigate that pendulum swing between order and chaos. We don't want things to be too predictable and boring, but we don't want chaotic and like anarchy. And a lot of the tradwife content creators are really, 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 really good at pushing forward simplicity, this order and predictability. And I think that that's also one of my biggest problems with this being sold as, if I'm a stay-at-home mom, my life is very simple. I'm, baking bread, and I can have a couple chickens in the backyard, and my kids, instead of being on their iPhones, we're going to be like doing crafts together and going to the zoo and going on camping trips. This is very simple. The reality of the amount of work that goes into these lifestyles are promoted as very simple is really ironic. And if you asked somebody like my great grandparents, who were born in like 1898 and 1903, how simple this simple life really was, like tending the animals and having all the yard work and the big farms and milking the cows and making your own bread, is anything but simple. It looks simple. It's not simple. Ballerina Farm, she shoots one video. She did a Mrs. American video where she kind of talked about how she produces those cooking videos. And she's like, yeah, one meal will take 2 to 4 hours to 2 to 4 days to shoot. And she also has a full staff. She has these
Wow.
teams of people back there that are like making sure that everything is, prepped in advance and helping style her, doing her makeup, all those different things. She's not just like, I'm going to put my camera up and shoot this very simple video of me just cooking pancakes for my family at home. It's very complex. Same thing with Narcissist. Same thing with any of the people on there. Like, it's being promoted to us because we see the 60-second video of simplicity. And for me growing up, I would watch real life trad wives, not influencers. I would watch the women at church, and I'd see a little snippet of their lives. Like I'd go to their homes to babysit, and I'd be in their house, and it's like, oh, this just seems so beautiful and simplistic and wholesome and orderly. And I didn't realize the hours and hours and hours, and that these women were still up at 2 o'clock in the morning doing their 17 loads of laundry a day and
Mhm.
cleaning up all of the stuff after cooking dinner.
Yeah. Okay, so I think next we wanna go into and kind of um deconstruct now how, because I think that ultimately the issue is in theory, a lot of things sound good, but if they don't work out that way in reality, then it doesn't matter how nice something sounds if it's not achievable, or if there's too many other things in the system that make it. I feel like there's 1,000 ways for things to fall apart. It as simple as it seems, I guess I had this idea that things could go wrong in certain ways that were extremely rare and extremely unlikely. Like if my husband died, or if he cheated on me, I felt like I that would be low because there's kind of I think a bias we have of ourselves that we're really good pickers of people, anybody like trustworthy, but especially in partners that we're just going to pick the good people. So I'm not going to marry somebody who's going to cheat on me, but nobody really does. Nobody wants to. Most people don't think that ever is going to happen, but it does. And I guess like with children growing up, like I knew I could do my best raising them, but you never know that they could go off the rails and be a wayward child. Like those were the
Mhm.
only real, like, genuine problems that could throw a wrench in things that I saw.
I'm
Can
in
you think of any
favor.
others? Like, that was it.
And so I was always afraid that maybe my husband would go through some job loss. My mom had
Mm,
health challenges, so I worried about a lot of that. Like I projected some of my childhood onto here's some of the things that could potentially go wrong with my
yeah.
relationship.
Yeah, that's good too. Yeah, job loss or yeah, something like that where you do have to end up being the provider that you weren't supposed to be in the first place. But yeah, that was it. So it just seemed like a pretty safe bet because yeah, the chances of the chances of your husband getting killed, or something, it just seemed really safe overall. But they
Especially
said
if the
that
Holy Father is holding your marriage in his hands because you have temple
right,
covenants that promise you that nothing's ever going to go wrong.
right.
When my husband took that oath in the temple, I knew that he was now going to be loyal to me forever. I never, ever, ever questioned because we had made covenants in the temple. I knew that he was never going to cheat on me, that he was never going to hurt me, that he was never going to do anything deceptive behind the scenes because I believed that oath.
Right. So what we learn as we get older, we see that there's a myriad of ways that these things can all fail. Some due to our control, but most not. I think there's an illusion that the success of the movement and the success of our marriage and families, that we do have a lot of control over it. And it's just a couple again external things that might really jack it up, but really there's a lot of things systemically working against this kind of a lifestyle and working against you specifically as the woman in this, that also often will fall onto any children that you have, will also suffer in similar ways that you will suffer when it comes apart. So I'm going to talk about that, my story a little bit, and then Jenny, I'll pass it to you. And it's not just us, but actually our peers, when we as we're growing up, we see what happens to our friends. Um and yeah, it's just there's just really a lot of ways that these things can go wrong. So for me personally, I didn't get married, and that wasn't it's a choice for me now, and I honestly feel very happy and very lucky that I didn't get married, especially very young. But that wasn't the plan. I always knew, and I planned my life really basically a year at a time as an adult, because I was assuming that I could meet the man of my dreams anytime. And by this time next year, I could be married. And so for me, when I went to college, I went to just get an education and be a smarter and educated person. I thought that would make me a better wife and better mother, just as a human being. And so I wasn't looking for how that could turn into a career. And I love my degree. I did get my degree. It absolutely did make me a better person, but it definitely didn't translate to any specific job skills later. And so when I found myself graduating from college, still unmarried, and then starting the workforce, I still kept this attitude that, every year it could be this year, it could be this year, it could be this year. But the types of jobs that I was getting and going for were the thankless ones, the ones that we all want to escape, exactly what we were hoping not to have to do by being able to marry somebody to provide for us. Because again, because I couldn't get those other jobs, I didn't have the skill set, or a lot of times I didn't have the confidence. And I also didn't want to invest in that. I didn't want to invest in a career or invest in more things because it seemed like a waste of time because, why waste, trying to, get a real estate license or learning this skill or that skill or moving up into management in a company when I plan on letting it all go as soon as I get married. So it just long term, there wasn't a job that I wanted to keep. And so it was just, it was the low paying, thankless kind of struggle jobs that I had for a long time. And so it wasn't until, I started to get quite a bit older before I finally gave myself permission, I guess, to start pursuing things that I really liked and made me happy so that even if I'm going to have to work, at least it's something that is a career that I'm interested in and is fulfilling and not just soul sucking like some of these jobs that I had were. So that's my side of it. And I guess again, we're going to bring up Mormonism a lot, although of course the message just applies across the board. But in Mormonism specifically, there's quite a population difference between single available, faithful Mormon women and Mormon men. And this was not told to me, which I think was, I don't know, I think would have been really important information and might have at least encouraged me to get into career stuff earlier is that awareness of just the numbers just don't add up. And so the likelihood, especially the older you get, the likelihood of something happening really significantly decreases if you're trying to find someone, in Mormonism, which is what we were taught to do. So over to you, Jenny. How did it work out for you? Because you did
So
get it.
I got it. Like I won the lottery. I found the returned missionary husband and got married at age 20, and we made a lot of money together, and I was really fertile. So I raised 5 babies in the $1 million homes and the country clubs and Mesa, Arizona, and had all the fancy SUVs and all this stuff. And on the outside, it was like, this is the dream life. And there were aspects of it that even for me living it seemed like the dream life. Like we've talked about the creativity and the time and money that I had to craft and do little preschools with my kids and all the home cooking and the chickens and all of the time that I had. And my husband loved to vacation. So I got to spend summers in Hawaii and Christmas in Telluride and Park City. And there were so many perks to the lifestyle that certainly were amazing. But here's the bit that I want people to pay attention to. I had absolutely no control over anything that I was investing in. When we saved for retirement, I helped my husband in our businesses. I made decisions to budget and invest in different things so that when we got into our late 50s, early 60s, we would be able to retire together and enjoy our lives and enjoy our grandbabies. And everything that I was investing in was dependent on this one pesky little detail of my husband being in love with me. 22 years into my marriage, I would find out that my husband, who had also been abusive, which is something that we're not even going to go down that rabbit hole today in our discussion, because it doesn't matter whether he was abusive or whether my husband was Prince Charming throughout that first 22 years. I would find out that there was infidelity throughout the marriage. And I was stuck for the next almost 3 years because I didn't have a penny of my own. I didn't have any credit. My name wasn't on our vehicles. My name wasn't even on the condo that we were renting. So I was then stuck with a man who I had just found out really had never loved me, didn't want to be with me. And when our marriage finally collapsed in 2018, everything that I had invested in disappeared when that love disappeared. When he no longer wanted to be with me, it all evaporated. I have a lot of people ask specific questions about how I lost everything, because isn't Arizona a 50-50 state? Shouldn't I have had assets to divide? What about alimony, child support? So I think it's important to just go through bing, bing, bing really quickly what happened. As soon as he abandoned our family for a 19-year-old escort, that was the final nail that was like on the coffin of our marriage. And our marriage ended 24 years after it began. He went to the bank a couple days later and just withdrew all of the money, just took everything out, our whole entire huge savings account was just gone overnight. I would discover that a couple days after the end of marriage when I finally got out of bed, stopped crying, drove to Trader Joe's to buy a couple of groceries for me and the kids, and I swiped my card. There should have been a fortune in the bank, and $43 worth of groceries at Trader Joe's were rejected. Card declined. I drove to the bank. Everything was gone. We didn't have assets to divide. We were renting a home. Anybody who's renting in a marriage, there's no asset to divide. You're not going to get anything. You can be married for 60 years and if there's no house to divide, there's nothing. We didn't own our vehicles. What I got after 24 years of marriage was zero money. I did get some Rubbermaid boxes full of like sleeping bags. I got a couch, I got a couple of chairs, I got some dishes and towels and pots and pans and things like that. I had full custody of our four children, which was also full financial responsibility for four children, and nothing. I went 10 months from the end of my marriage until our divorce finalized when there were court orders with absolutely no income. And then when our divorce finalized, I was only paid alimony, which was supposed to go for 5 years, one time. 1 month, my ex husband paid alimony. The next month, he's like, I'm not going to pay alimony. Let's see what happens. He realized the court wasn't going to do anything. We divorced in 2018. This year is the first year that he has recorded that he has a job. He just simply went 6 years without working, and there were no wages to garnish. And I found myself as a 44-year-old woman with four children financially dependent on me, with my savings wiped out, all of our retirement, the kids' college funds, life insurance, anything that could possibly be liquidated had just been liquidated and hidden. And we didn't have a home to sell. We didn't have any assets to divide. So 24 years of marriage, I got some sleeping bags, a couch, some dishes, uh, blow up rubber raft, and like my toothbrush. And I found myself trying to financially support children with the last time I ever had a job or any education, I was 19 years old.
So no
Oh,
increase in skills that like somebody else would have had all of this time and a huge gap, which employers also don't like. So yeah,
yeah.
thanks for sharing. And again, I think we all have friends. We've all seen another like a myriad of ways that these things have unfolded. So we're gonna go back through those things that we talked about before. Actually, before I do that, I wanted to talk real quick about some of the ways that kind of where the people that we're hoping to reach we are women who are looking into this, the young women who are about to make these kinds of decisions and are wanting to. We're kind of starting at a point of disadvantage though, because part of the messaging of the movement I think is a lot of anti-feminism messaging. And so just this idea, especially older women, anyone who knocks the lifestyle is a hater. There's all kinds of stories. A promiscuous person, selfish, if you're career focused, all of these kinds of things. There's a lot of work that goes into, I think, telling us not to trust people who I think would warn us about this lifestyle. So yeah, and I wanted to talk about why that is, I think, a little bit. And I think, I mean, we know why it supports the message overall, and it does help to funnel people in. But I guess maybe I want to speak for myself, and I'll let you speak for yourself, Jenny. Why we do why we're doing this, I guess, and why it matters. And it's not the lifestyle that we're hating on. I want to say, at least for me, it's not that we want women, young women, to hate men or to mistrust men. It's not that we don't want you to be happy or have like fulfilling, romantic relationships. Like if you can find your ride or die, I love that for you. I still hope it'll happen for me, but I'm okay if it doesn't. But it's just I'm in this because I want to help people avoid the pitfalls. And so that's why we're going to go through and talk about what those pitfalls are. And rather than saying like don't be a trad wife, be a career woman, eschew all men, never get married, never have children. Those things are all terrible. That's not what we're saying at all. We're saying you can have these things, but here's how to do it the most safely, in the most empowering way that really sets up a foundation for you to succeed in this lifestyle if this is really what you want to do. And ultimately, even if you do everything right, there are still some things that happen outside of our control. So if if the worst were to happen, you have resources, you have a way out, you have a way to succeed, you have a way to set up your children to succeed and do well also. So that's what I wanted to say. This is not a bit, and why we kind of titled it this way is, feminists fixing or making trad wives better. I think we can. And so just because I'm not a trad wife and I'm single and childless, I understand why it seems kind of an odd pick to get some advice from on this. But it really is just, from my own experience and from what I see in the world and just a lot of real data. I don't have to experience all of these things myself to see what's happening around and still care about younger people and that it doesn't happen to them. So that's my spiel. I'll turn it over to you, Jenny, for yours.
I love
Why
all
are you doing this? And
I love
yeah.
all that, and I agree with all that. And I have a lot of people who hurl like superlatives at me, like I am anti-man, like I'm a man hater, I'm anti-family, I'm pro-divorce, the woke feminist. I'm just trying to destroy the basic foundation of society, which is the American nuclear family. And that is absolutely not the case at all. I know that men and women, or humans, are designed. Obviously, I'm very supportive of LGBTQ relationships. Also, humans need intimate partnerships. We are hardwired for love. All the data out there shows that. But I'm really tired of people being in these transaction ships where it's all about the consumerism and the capitalism and the financial devastation, and also the ways that we're entangled in one another's lives in ways that are really negative in many different aspects, instead of just focusing on the relationship. And for me, it's like saying that just because I'm warning women about the dangers of not having your seatbelt on and being in a car accident, that I'm anti-car. No, I think that we need cars. It's nice to be able to drive further than I can walk. But when I get in my vehicle, I put my seatbelt on, I make sure that I have the airbags, I have the car insurance, I've taken defensive driving classes, and I researched and bought the safest car that I possibly can. It's ridiculous to me that we get into these relationships without any type of seatbelts on, because God is taking care of our marriage and love is going to conquer all, when the data and the research don't show it. And it's also very problematic to me that when we get married, we're not looking at any of that data. I think
Right.
that when you go down to the courthouse and get that marriage license, that they should actually tell you, you have a 70% chance while you're raising children that your marriage is going to have one of these major catastrophes that we're going to talk about in just a minute. I think that they should tell you the divorce rate. The current divorce rate here in Maricopa County is 53%. I think that we need to know those risks and then make decisions about all of the other stuff. That doesn't impact our love, our connection, our relationship, the way that we are with one another. That just impacts, what am I doing with my education? What am I doing with my savings account? Do I need a prenup? Do I need a postnup? How do I configure all of this around here? How do I put my seatbelt on so that I can drive the car?
Yeah.
That's
I think the messaging is that these kinds of things we're talking about undermines it, when really I think it's the opposite. It actually strengthens it and shores it up and makes it more likely to succeed. So, all
absolutely.
right. Should
Into
we jump
that,
into it?
let's jump in.
Okay. Here we go. So the first thing, that the number one had been stability and security. I'll go ahead and I'll just run through this list really quick, and Jenny, jump in whenever you'd like. So we've got systemic economic failure, job loss, outside events, kind of all connected together. So obviously, most recently, I would say the COVID pandemic, a lot of people, their jobs were let go of, or they moved to home, and there were a lot of families and couples that found out that they did not do well together when they had to spend more time together. So that's an issue. Plus natural disasters, things that maybe a flood or a hurricane tearing apart your home. These things are really disruptive, and just the economy. Things change, industries change. So sometimes a career just kind of phases out of usefulness, or your husband can either through his own personality or personal issues or issues with the people issues at work. These things can all affect whether that one income earner that you have. And that's the second thing I have on there: reliance on only one income stream. It's actually the opposite to as much as we were taught to feel like it was great to have a provider and that feels more stable to think someone else is taking care of us. It's actually less stable because essentially you're putting all of your eggs in one basket. You're relying on one income stream. We're going to talk. Jennie has more. She can go on this, and she also has a lot of content about this on her channel. So I just want to say that for a real deep dive, if you're in this situation, we'll point out to resources. But there is a divorce law bias against women. Women statistically are the worst off between men and women after divorce in myriads of ways. And then, of course, we have death or disability. Something can happen to your husband, especially there are some jobs that are more dangerous if it's construction, etc. But even if he's got a desk job, a car accident can happen, or a freak medical issue. Young people 36 years old can drop dead of an unknown heart issue. There's always something. And then disability
None of us are
accidents can happen
guaranteed to
anytime.
live until we're 76. Like, we all look at the average age and it's like, that's when I'm going to die. None of us are guaranteed. I have so many friends who are widows, so many friends who are widows, like in their 20s, 30s.
Yeah. Yeah. The next thing on here, I put infidelity, prostitution, porn. These are all things that are assumed that will not be in your relationship, but they're actually quite common in these trad relationships, in religious and conservative cultures. Um, and then I added in, so, and that, like Jennie, that's what happened. That was ultimately what kind of ended
Hmm.
the marriage, and your stability and all the security that you had, that was ended by that. I put fraud and other crimes because those are very high, and I can't help but wonder if it's connected to being the sole provider. That maybe just the stress of that, and the weight of that over time leads to at least some men taking shortcuts and starting to scam people in order to get more control of that. That's just a theory. I think it sounds reasonable. Um, and then lastly, well, yeah, you're economically trapped, Jennie, as you've said. You're tied to that man and his love for you, which can really go any, or not have been there in the first place. I think men can be really good at promising us and making us feel really good about ourselves and what they can do for us, and maybe not actually mean it. And then the last thing was something that I had you added on for me, was the highest child poverty rates. So going back to this idea of motherhood and children, and that feminists hate that, really children come off so much worse. And when you had talked about the highest rates of poverty, there's a difference in like the very, very highest you were saying was for the children of divorcees, but even in marriage, in these trad marriages, they still have the highest rates for
Now,
for children with married parents.
that was
Yeah.
CDC data for 2023, that the highest poverty rates are within families where there's a stay-at-home mom. And that makes sense because there's just a dad supporting the kids. Often when you have the stay-at-home mom, you're going to make decisions to have more children. So you're very likely over your parenting capacity economically. So you're dividing that paycheck between 3, 4, 5 kids. If I'm a working mom, I may not have 5 kids because I'm going to do the math and I'm going to say I can't provide childcare for 5 children. So there are so many different complex, nuanced issues that go into why that stay-at-home mom has higher child poverty rates than the rest of the demographic. But that is where a lot of poverty comes from. So the single moms, obviously high poverty demographic, high child poverty. And the stay-at-home moms have an even higher demographic, just simply, I think, because there's more of them. And then the divorced stay-at-home moms, again, higher poverty demographic. And poverty, I mean, that's, you have to have a fairly low income to be below the poverty line, depending on the state that you're living in. So child
Right.
poverty is overwhelmingly an epidemic within stay-at-home mom, the
And
traditional family.
yeah, and poverty isn't just like having less things or not fancy things. There's a real, I think, mental and emotional burden on parents and children. The children feel it too, and that translates to educational outcomes, health outcomes, their future financial, like their ability to earn more in the future. These are all the things that poverty really kind of shortchanges them on, or makes it even more difficult for them to achieve as they grow. So
Maven, I think that's really important for you to point out because I think that as we discuss poverty, it can be, sometimes assumed that, well, they're just not going to have the big screen TVs and the fancy clothes, but they're going to be fine. Poverty has a myriad of negative impacts on people's lives.
Yeah.
And it can be that, like you say, the access to healthcare, access to healthy food, access to clean living circumstances, the mental health, constant stress. There are so many negative implications for children in poverty that are very difficult to deal with. Not just they're not going to be cool and have friends in school.
Right, right. I think the mental health thing is, to me, I one of the biggest issues. It's constantly undermined as being important. As if we could, it's the whole like pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of thing. Um, but when you are severely depressed, when things seem so hopeless, you just don't have a reservoir. You just don't have it in you. You don't have the energy. You don't have you just don't have what it takes to be able to do that. And mental health issues are the number one reason people get into drugs and other addictive substances. So you're at a higher risk of that, and your children, which of course things will really start to spiral once that's the only kind of relief or good feeling you have, because everything in life is just seems so dark and so hopeless. And then the other issue that mental health leads into is, I think, homelessness or chronic homelessness. A little bit of that is part of my story too, just in the struggle with, like, finding jobs and just trying to make adult life work when I wasn't expecting to be, still single. I also went through a period of, I had a van, so I would say, like, technically I'm not, and I try to play it off as I'm being the quirky millennial. I'm doing this on purpose. I'm trying to kind of like stick it to the man. But it wasn't as much of a choice as I made it out to be. And yeah, it makes it really difficult to find better jobs. I clawed my way out of it eventually, but I think I think without that experience, some people really just don't understand how hard that is. And I can't imagine having children. At least I only had to worry about myself at that time. So anyway, yeah, the mental health issue can lead to chronic homelessness and just spiral things out where it's nearly impossible to fix. So
Maven,
um,
if anybody'd like to read a little bit about my experience in homelessness after my divorce, I have a Substack article that I'll send you the link so that we can put it in your thing and my thing. My Substack again is Life Take Two. My series is Churchified, and it's entitled The Trad Wife Trap. And it was a little journal entry that I had originally written the day that I lost my home as a mom, moved everything out, put it in a storage unit. And that night I knew that I wasn't sleeping with my kids and we didn't have homes. We had nowhere to go. My little 8-year-old son had a Rubbermaid box. It had his school stuff and his clothes and like his toothbrush and whatever he needed. And we had this very carefully orchestrated schedule of he's going to spend 3 nights at this guy's, this friend's house, and then 2 nights at this other friend. And he was 8 years old, couch surfing. My daughter was staying with cousin and she was also couch surfing. And I was just living out of my car, tent camping, sometimes sleeping at friends' houses, but sometimes it was just easier to be in my car with my stuff and not have to like move around all the time.
yeah,
And it was really hard. So that article, highly recommend that you read, like the
right.
heartbreaking moment of closing that door on my storage unit and then dropping my kids off at their friends' houses and homelessness hitting me as a mom after buying into all of this trad wife like propaganda, like my life is going to be magical forever. And it was magical for 24 years and then it ended and was no longer magical and we became homeless. And that first night I'm like, oh, how am I supposed to go to the bathroom? So I scrounged up some money to go to Walmart and buy myself a stack of red Solo cups. And that was my overnight bathroom in my car.
I had a thought before we move on to other things, is that I think I alluded to this earlier, that when the trad wife life goes wrong, there, just as there are a myriad ways for it to do that, there are myriad ways for us to be blamed for it. So I think, if there is somebody, hopefully our target audience is watching, I'm just going to predict, because this is my own personal experience, that your minds may be going to, well, what did they do wrong, to get this way? And I just want to say that it's not helpful because first of all, you can't know that with just from the surface information. As comforting as it may be to feel like you figured out what somebody else did wrong, and therefore like it's that control is back on you. As long as you don't do that thing, then it won't happen to you. I want to ask for you to resist, I guess, and try to um just I have compassion and have some reality, some realistic expectations here, because ultimately we're human beings, and as much as you may want to control everything and do everything right, it is literally impossible for us to do that. It is impossible for you to do everything right, and sometimes when we don't do, sometimes it's okay, sometimes things happen and it's not a catastrophe, it doesn't destroy everything. But sometimes it does, and it's not your fault and it's not our fault. And so yeah, I just want to say, just try to have an open mind about how this really can affect you, because again, this can help you avoid that happening, or at least see red flags way earlier, and protect and save yourself a lot of pain and heartache. So did you want to say anything on that before
I
we
really
go to the
appreciate
next?
you saying that. I appreciate you saying that, and that's something that I have to address on my own channel all the time. When my marriage first collapsed and I found myself sleeping in my car while he's over there making, high six-figure income, traveling the world and living the life, and somehow I'm not able to access any of that money or get the courts to access any of that money for me, and I don't have the job skills. I start interviewing for jobs and nobody wants to hire somebody who's just been a trad wife who helped her husband in his career for 24 years. I felt very much alone. Like, this is because I did things wrong. I'm a terrible person and I just suck.
Mhm.
Like, honestly, it's not even more complicated than that. I suck and I'm the only one going through this. And it was when I first came to TikTok and did that first video, and millions of other women started seeing what I was going through. And I would wake up every morning to all of the comments and the DMs from other people. And then my sister was going through it, and my one of my best friends was going through it, and I saw, oh, this wasn't that I necessarily made mistakes or that I could have seen the mistakes that I was making. This is a systemic failure. The system let all of us down because it doesn't work. And we're going to go through that in a minute. And when I started to hear from, like, maybe I reach 8 to 10 million people a month, I don't know how many comments and how many other stories I've heard. I can't even read them all. I hear from thousands of women from New Zealand to South Africa to Ireland and, Florida, Hawaii, all over the world. I hear from other women, hey, I just got divorced and now I'm on food stamps. And then I lost my kids and this happened and that happened. When I started to hear the me too of this, the trad wife life,
Yeah.
and that was the moment that I woke up and saw this was not just that I made mistakes. This was that we're all making these same mistakes collectively. And that's a much bigger issue because I don't just have a lesson to learn. We all have lessons to learn because we're all kind of jumping off the same cliff together. So
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that
And
up.
and that's again why we're in these spaces doing these things, because if it was enough for us to have learned our own lesson, then that's where it would end. But I think we both deeply care about setting up other women for success. It's not about tearing other women down or being jealous of what they have when they have achievements. But it's really, and I know that's how I have two nieces. One is very severely disabled, so she will never be married. This is never an option for her. But my other niece, I want her to be healthy. I want her to be happy. I want her to try to get through life avoiding as many of these major pitfalls as possible. So, and I want that for everyone. I want that for my friends. I want that for their kids, for their daughters. Yeah, that's why we're sharing this. And I had another thought that I think is important to point out. If you're watching this and you're coming from a trad wife culture, um, like we did, I bet that if you look around at other women in your circle, in your religion, in your community, in your family who also espouse these values, I bet you still see a lot of failure of the system. And I bet you've already justified or figured out in your mind why all of these other ones, failed, or aren't quite looking right, even though they're still towing the line. They're still giving the same, they talk the way that you do. They still have the same values, but oh, they're divorced, or this happened or that happened. Um, I think we're kind of taught to ignore the evidence that's actually like all around us, and sometimes that goes back generations of ways that just women are, I guess, just really burdened by the system, or not saved and not supported, and the promises really fall through. That happened with my own mom. She and I guess this is something, because we know sometimes people come to this movement from the other side of things, where they feel like their mom was too invested in the career and not present at home. My mother had a very abusive and neglectful home. The father wasn't there. My grandmother didn't work. My mom was basically parentified. It was a really, really rough situation for her. And so for her, of course, this trad wife, this was like everything that she ever wanted as a kid, which is a loving family, and for people to love her and like her and admire her rather than neglect her or abuse her. This was her dream. This was everything she wanted. A knight on a white horse and taken to the castle and happily ever after. And it fell through. It didn't serve her. She wasn't happy in the marriage. As a child, I didn't inherently bring her a lot of joy. I brought her some. I don't think she would say she regrets having children. Most women don't. Some do, but I don't think my mom would say that. But still, like, she was not happy, and it was very clear, and neither was I or my siblings or my dad. None of us were happy. It was pretty miserable. But even then, I still found ways to still think all the same things that she thought, that I'm miserable now, but when it's my turn, I'm going to make it better. I'm going to do everything right. I'm going to have enough faith not to work. And my mom, I realized she married too young. She went right from this abusive family like into a relationship, and she didn't know who she was. So I was thinking, I'm not going to get married at 18 right out of high school. I'm going to go to college. I'll grow into a person, and that'll fix it. And then I'll get married in the temple. I'll find my white knight and my castle, and I will have the happily ever after that my mom is not having, because she did something wrong and she messed it up. And same with other people who divorced or whatever. Like, even if I didn't try to nail down specifically something, it was just an internal assumption they did something wrong. So, okay.
Agreed. Been there.
That's right. So, yeah, yeah. Um, Back to this, and we'll try to go through. Uh, we'll be running over these things really quickly, but hopefully it gives people something to think about. And then, of course, Jenny has a lot of in depth. So this one we talked about. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, the stronger marriage. Infidelity is here again, because like we said, it's quite common in traditional cultures. Domestic abuse, this idea of the husband leading the home often kind of breeds opportunities for this and justifies it. If women aren't being submissive enough, a lot of men feel entitled to abuse. There's also emotional abuse, manipulation, neglect, sexual assault, and a lot of that has to do with just really not valuing consent and consent education. And then child abuse and homicide and family annihilators. I have both there, because homicide is sometimes it's parent to child, sometimes it's partner to partner, usually men towards women. But the real big famous cases that come out where a man has taken out everybody and sometimes himself too, these also are overwhelmingly from trad wife type
Mhm.
cultures. Jenny?
Yeah, absolutely. And we could do a whole episode just on that, and maybe we should.
Yeah. All right, but for brevity, for this is the 30,000-foot view. We'll go to the next one. Do you want to read over these, Jenny, and offer
I
your?
So I just want to say on the last slide, I felt like because I was marrying this returned missionary in the temple, we were, our whole entire life was given to Heavenly Father. I felt like I was making sure that I was going to be immune to all of this. My marriage was going to be strong because I was doing absolutely everything right. So I have to be honest, 22 years in, like, yes, he was abusive. Yes, there were all kinds of things that had happened throughout our marriage. But when I found out that he had had 22 years of affairs and some of the other stuff that had happened behind the scenes that I'd never known about, I was shocked. Like, I could not believe that marrying that religious man. Yeah, certainly I thought, if I marry a non-member, if I marry somebody who doesn't go to church on Sunday, if I marry a guy who doesn't seem successful and have that squeaky clean image on the outside, I'm probably going to end up being cheated on and abused, and bad things are going to happen. I thought that I had absolutely ensured that that would never happen to me because I married the right guy in the temple. in the right way, and I was the right wife. So
Same. Same. I was under the impression that I was safer around Mormon men, and that non-Mormon men would be more likely to just want to use me for my body. That's kind of the narrative. They just
yeah,
want you to, want to get in your pants. And they don't have these strong family values. So yeah, they're more likely to leave,
they don't have the
cheat, all
spirit.
this.
They don't have the priesthood. They don't.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. So just knowing someone was, I knew that just being Mormon was not enough. So I still had some level of
you
like,
to be a good Mormon.
right, but still that could be really performative too, so it's easy to perform goodness, so as long as they were checking the right boxes that made it look like they were good, yeah, I that's who I thought, and that's who I was looking for in a spouse as well.
Okay, want me to read these?
Yeah,
Okay, so under the fulfillment and joy category, um, there's a lot of isolation. Needs, self-care hobbies are selfish distractions from family time and finances. No one size fits all fulfillment. High rates of depression. Cut off from potential fulfilling opportunities and relationships outside the home. So that's the reality of this fulfillment and joy. And Maven, I do have to say that my friends and family who are still in this traditional family lifestyle, where the mom stays home and the dad goes out and works, and they have all the kids and all the stuff and the housework and laundry and things to keep up, and friends and followers and all of the people that I hear from around the world who have been and tried what traditional family lifestyles, who transitioned out. This is one of the things that we talk about the most, is just like, as a mom, I felt like it was so selfish for me to say, I just need somebody else to take the kids for an hour so that I can go lay down and take a nap, because I have a baby that I'm nursing all night. I'm exhausted. I have four other kids. I have all of these church callings and this big house that I'm keeping up with, and being my husband's personal assistant at work and all these different things. Like, I'm tired. I need a nap. And if I ever said just, I need my basic needs met, and then even going above and beyond that, like, maybe I want a girls' night out that I can like go out with some other friends without the kids and like just eat enchiladas together somewhere. Um, that would have felt absolutely ridiculously selfish for me. So you're kind of sold on all of this personal fulfillment and everything. But the reality is that raising kids and staying at home is very isolating, and it is a daily grind. Mom life is not as magical as it looks on the outside.
right, and there's moments of it, and I lived with my youngest brother and his wife and their 2 kids for a while, and I did see that a lot. So even though I was another adult in the home, especially when my brother was out working, so my sister-in-law wasn't completely alone. I was working too, so I wasn't always present, for every minute of the day, but I was at least available for needs and issues to pop up, and yeah, it's just I really saw that for her, and where we lived, she just didn't have we just didn't have a community or a connection, so they went to church, they had church, but they kinda had that only on Sundays, and actually during COVID, they didn't even because it was all, like, digital, so, yeah, that was something that I felt and saw and have seen also from friends too, the firsthand kind of sadness of, there is a lot of isolation and loneliness despite this, promise that you don't have it. And I feel like a lot of these teachings they'll say words to kind of try to make up for it. So when we're talking about like the needs and the self-care, I feel like the people will push back and say, no, no, like of course self-care is okay. But really that the only time that message comes out is when people talk like this or when people are saying like I'm exhausted and I need help, then well yeah, of course take care of yourself. But all of the other messaging the entire time growing up is that anytime you're prioritizing yourself over family, that's selfishness. So, yeah, if you have a hobby like photography that costs money or, takes you out of the home, maybe like mountain biking, there's all kinds of things that, you know, help us to be better people and would serve as outlets and actually help us to be better partners and better mothers because we get that refreshment and that differentiation. But again, in these cultures, usually it's seen as bad. So that's one thing to try to I guess fix um or try to avoid. If you want to do this, make sure you take care of your needs, you have your self-care, your hobbies. They're not distractions. They bless your family as well. Anything else we want to advise on this one?
Well, and I think that this whole category right here can be fixed with not being over your parenting capacity. So it's a basic mathematical formula. How much money do you make? How much money do you need for one child, two children, three children? Not just putting that in God's hands and like Heavenly Father is going to take care of all of that, but like what do we actually earn? How much time is it going to take? And then the division of labor. So in my Man Proof Your Life program, we go through labor within the home. And, if the husband is working 70-hour weeks, so he's never able to do homework or laundry or any of those things, then of course you're going to assume all of the labor within the home and you're never going to have time to do anything outside of that. So for some people, maybe you think I want six kids, but your actual parenting capacity, what you can handle with time and finances, is two kids or one kid. And for myself, having been a trad wife for 24 years, and at one point I had five children under the age of 11, my life was so busy, and we had huge homes that I was responsible for all of the upkeep, very gendered in our responsibilities in the home, where I did all of the stuff with the kids in the house, and Jake just worked. That was his only responsibility. Now I still have children at home, but I've restructured my life according to my own Man Proof Your Life program. And in this role right here, or in this little category that we're talking about right here, my life is completely different. My partner is responsible for dinner. I only cook 2 nights a week. He's responsible for dinner 3 nights a week. The kids cook one night and then we go out one night. He's responsible for the laundry. He supports me in my career. We share responsibilities. And just because some of my kids are older adults now, I now only have two children at home and part-time custody of stepchildren that are only here, once in a while. And I find that my parenting capacity really only is two children. When I had five kids at home, emotionally and physically, I could not focus on all of them. My kids were just getting little bits of a mommy. They were just herded around as this big giant group. And I wasn't really able to sit down and connect with them, meet their needs, have conversations, and do all the things that they needed me to do. So I've lived the two different lives back to back, and I can see the difference the most in this category. I'm able now, 5 nights a week that I don't cook, to go for a hike, to take a nap at 4 o'clock in the afternoon if I want to get together with girlfriends, do things that I never could have done as a Mormon mom of five kids under the age of 11. And then as they grew, I never, ever had any personal fulfillment. And I was fine with that. That was the sacrifice that Heavenly Father wanted me to make. So it didn't matter that I never ate, never slept, never did anything that I wanted to do. Um, but it was exhausting and it had a massive toll on my health and wellness.
I had a friend that expressed something similar that and I think she had 4 under 5 and that yeah,
Oh,
life was just chaos. It's just pure survival mode, and she said when she saw, like, her friends, her other friends who because she followed she had children before she really felt ready, but it was her duty. Our feelings about feeling ready, that's another selfishness kind of a thing. If you're ready to get married, you're ready to have children. That's kind of the messaging I got, and that was what she got too. So despite her misgivings, she went ahead and started having children earlier, and then and closer together than she would have chosen, I guess, if it was really up to her and her comfort. But she said when it she sees her peers or her friends that did do motherhood on their own timeline and within their resources, she said that they seem so much happier, even with the chaos that, newborns and stuff, the sleepless nights, all that's still there, but there's still a level of joy and like direct one-to-one bonding that she didn't have a chance for. And it was the most heartbreaking thing I've ever heard, for her to say that she felt the church robbed her of joy that she could have had in motherhood. And I feel the same, that I think we deserve and should be our joy, but it's actually undermined and in a way taken and made worse when and it's just another way that it goes against the messaging. The messaging is that we've got one-on-one time with the kids, we're having these bonds, but yeah, especially if you're overburdened, you're not having those bonds, so it's still the same kind of outcome. So yeah. All right. Oh, I think I went skipped over one. The work stress. Did I? Okay, hold on. Let me just, yeah, no, we went through these. All right, work stress next. I'll read this one. No escape or break from home stress. You just touched on that. Always on duty, especially when kids are young. Burnout definitely happens at home. I would also add boredom too, when kids are young. If you don't have adult conversations or people that you can relate to on your own level, um, and then not all work is soulless. So yes, we know those jobs that nobody wants, but a lot of work can be personally very fulfilling and meaningful. And a lot of times that work is with children in schools or it's social work, foster programs. There's dance instructors. There's all kinds of ways that people find fulfillment that doesn't necessarily exclude children. And so that's a, I guess, a misconception to think about. And then the cutoff from additional sources of fulfillment out of home, that kind of goes along with the rest of things I'm saying there. But again, this is actually kind of, if I'm going back to the hobbies thing, hobby, if you have hobbies outside the home, that also it gives you more connections and more community. So that would also help with the isolation. But the focus is really on wanting having women at home. So when you just being cut off from the hobbies, it's self-fulfillment. You're also cut off from potential friendships, and again, more meaning that could add to your life and refresh you and help you to be a better mother and parent. So
It's
do you
one
have
of the
thoughts on
biggest negatives of the traditional family because we now have science and research around what humans actually need, and we don't need husband and wife and kids. We need tribes. We need sometimes a couple of intimate partners. So, like your husband, and I'm not talking about like polyamorous relationships or polygamy, but like you need your husband and maybe like a sister as your confidant, and maybe like a best friend or somebody that's also an emotionally intimate partnership. And then we need six close friends and then some acquaintances and older mentors, like the multi generational tribe. I gave a sermon yesterday on our atheist church about multi generational tribes. The science around what human beings need and this diverse tribal system that we have to be happy is completely different than the traditional family. So I grew up thinking all I need is my husband. He's my everything. We're going to complete each other. And then our kids are going to be totally fulfilling, and everybody else is just fringe. So I found myself after 24 years of just living in my home, focusing on my husband. He was my primary relationship. Everybody else was just kind of peripheral. I found myself feeling very isolated, very disconnected, and very much alone because that's what I should have felt. I needed a
that?
greater tribal system. So again, I've had the before and after. I had the traditional family life, and now I'm this woke feminist, crazy ex-Mormon atheist, 6 years after the trad wife life came crumbling to the ground. And we intentionally within our relationship try to always be building our tribe. So we uncouple intentionally several days a week. What that means, Kevin goes off and goes to his male Bible study, and Kevin sings on his worship team at his Christian church. And I sometimes hike by myself when Kevin and I could be hiking together. And I spend time with friends when ordinarily with my first marriage it would have been date night, but it's like I need to have tribal connections. Kevin needs to have tribal connections that are more complex and diverse. And because I now work, I now have these beautiful rich relationships with other people where I'm working on projects and working on articles, and I have security outside of my relationship. And Maven, I will tell you, I have never in my whole entire life, not as a child growing up and not in the 24 years of marriage, my whole entire 44 years of Mormonism, I have never felt so connected and so bonded to other humans ever before. I have less friends. I don't have my big Mormon wards. My whole Mormon family cut me off. That's a whole other topic. So I've been ghosted by everybody in my family. But the relationships that I do have are so rich and meaningful and beautiful. And here's the thing that's so interesting is that it's made my relationship with my partner so much better. Kevin knows that he has this whole guy pack that he's bonded to, and that makes him feel so much more secure in our relationship. He shows up with me as this whole complete partner, and we're not just totally dependent on each other. Some of my problems now, I don't just take these to my husband. I work stuff out with my girlfriends, my older female mentors, people that I work with, and when I come to Kevin, when we're together in the evenings or spending weekends together, we have this whole tribe that's supporting us so we can show up for one another in our intimate relationship in ways that me and my husband of 24 years doing it the Mormon style were never able to. So this is probably the category that I again have so much personal satisfaction in doing it different.
That's great. I want to add for another podcast that I work on, Mormon stories, where there's a lot of stories of deconstruction. I see this a ton, and it's also personally true for me. Unfortunately, I'm also estranged from my immediate family, some by my choice and some not. But the relationships that I cultivate are richer, they are better, they're better for me. I hope I'm better for them as well, that it's very mutual. And yeah, but over and over and over, so many guests on the other podcasts, and it's not always, because sometimes when you deconstruct, if one person deconstructs from a very, centralized religion, it will affect the marriage. But for the ones that stay together, almost universally they express that it's better, it's stronger, communication is stronger and better. They talk about things that they never were able to have the freedom to talk about before. They're better with conflict resolution, and also like becoming their own persons, and like you're saying, having their own time. It strengthens that. And the same for parenting. I don't know how many times I've heard of parents saying that they're more connected with their kids, outside of these systems than within it. And especially from men who have this, authoritative. A lot of them have said that that kind of parenting, that because it's the leadership, really kind of ruined or estranged themselves from their children initially. And by rejecting these gender roles, they've been able to connect emotionally and have genuine good relationships with their children, as they're older, um that as adults, when they don't have to hang out together, they want to and still do. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I hadn't thought of that. um is this where we were at? Was there anything else to add to that?
I don't know. I do think it's ironic that one of the reasons I stepped into the traditional family role wholeheartedly was because I thought that being a career woman would make me stressed out and a terrible parent. And I just thought that it would ruin my life. And now that I am a working mom, and just because of my divorce, just during my finances, like Maven, I work 7 days a week. There's not a day that I'm not doing one of my jobs. Now that I am a working mom, I'm actually a better mom than I ever was before. I bring more to the table with my kids. They find me far more interesting than when my whole entire life was just baking them cookies and doing their laundry. And
Yes.
I don't have those needs for my kids. My kids don't have to validate me. My teenagers think I'm ridiculous, but I have validation from people I work with and I get fulfillment in other places. My husband's not the only one who has to like think I'm special. I have a few people around the world who think I'm special, and the pressure is off of that relationship. I just think it's ironic that I didn't want a career because I didn't want the stress, when actually being a stay at home mom was the most stressful thing that I've ever done in my entire life. And now that I'm a working mom, I have less stress than I ever have. And I'm so happy. I am there's not even a measure. I don't know how we would even like quantify that, but I am infinitely more happy and fulfilled than I ever was in my 24 years of Mormon trap wife life. Full
And I
stop.
think that's, yeah, that's it. I mean, it is a trap to fall into, if you're in the wrong job, and one that's not a good fit for you, then it can be all of those things. But we are kind of taught that it's almost automatic, like that's how all of jobs would be. And not all jobs are as intense as yours. So even without all of that, someone you could have a part-time job that covers your needs for socialization and community contribution, and without all of that, and still it will improve your partnership, your parenting. And I hadn't thought of this too, but when you I see this all the time. I've seen this in my own siblings and in myself towards my mother. I didn't have a lot of respect for her, even though there's so much around respecting mothers in the culture. I just, I saw my mom, you know, be human and make a lot of mistakes. And, I judged her for her not being happy because again, it was her fault that she was doing things wrong. She had a bad attitude. She was working outside of the home. You know, I was too busy blaming her to really respect her. And, um, you know, childhood was tough. She didn't have the tools and resources just jumping into parenthood coming from the family that she did. I can say my childhood was better than hers, but it still wasn't. We weren't a strong and happy family. But as an adult now, and again, it's on this other side of things, like the feminist side of things, I can have so much more sympathy and appreciation for my mother. It doesn't change the reality of what home life was like, but I feel for her and for this child that grew up in the home that she grew up in, and how much she wanted something different. And she did, according to what information she had, that's how she thought she would get it, and unfortunately it didn't work. But yeah, I just think I think better about my mother now, even though we are currently estranged. Because of feminism and on the side of things. And children too, when you sacrifice everything, you're teaching your children to expect that. And so I do find it ironic that a lot of times it's in the conservative cultures, they'll look down on children that aren't well behaved, and a lot of times it's kind of seen as like permissive parenting. It's the liberals, it's the gentle parents that are raising these entitled children. But a lot of trad children are entitled, especially towards women and their labor and their time. And I think that's because their mothers have taught them, if I ask you something, like, you're supposed to drop everything and do it. And if not, then you're the problem, and not my lack of preparation or something, because mom is doing everything for me. So sometimes, yeah, again, this is another place where the system itself is actually having the opposite effect that it's supposed to. And I also like when a mom doesn't feel like she can have hobbies or anything, if you have daughters, like, you're teaching her that too. She's looking at you as her future. And I did learn a bit, like, by through warning, I guess, from not wanting to be like my mom in certain ways. um I wanted to, yeah, be more respected and be a whole person. So anyway, off more tangents, sorry. But these are important things to think about, I guess. These are things that we want to have.
All right, next up we have religious morals. And of course that's what we're buying into, that we're going to have all of these beautiful morals and values. But here's the reality. Um, Divorce, infidelity, child abuse, sexual assault, promiscuity, risky sex, STDs, abortion, teen pregnancy, and ostracization of non-conforming family members. And Maven, I know that on all of these, I'm like, oh, this one was really particularly heartbreaking. This one was disappointing. But when you're sold a fairy tale and then it doesn't come true, I think that there's all kinds of like different things that can be like the most painful, depending on the time. This one was a big deal for me because as a teenager growing up, I purposely didn't date the non-members, the guys that I didn't think had those religious morals that were on the same page as me as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, because I thought that then I would avoid the divorce, the infidelity, child abuse, sexual assault, all these different things. I thought that I was bulletproofing my life so that like none of this horrible list would ever happen to me. When in reality, in my situation and so many other people, um, these traditional family structures, that trad wife life, the husband and wife being dependent, or the wife being dependent on the husband, and all the things that we've talked about up until this point, really kind of creates a perfect storm for all of this to happen. Do you know that 57% of men self report as having at least one affair in their lives? And that statistic doesn't change for Christian men, religious men of any type versus non religious men. That statistic is pretty much consistent whether you marry the good church boy or not.
I also felt the same. I thought that because there's so many things that can go wrong, and especially as a teenager, like, the world can seem so scary sometimes when it comes to like just the news, and STDs, and just there's just like it seems like a thousand ways for, and I was seeing it through a religious lens of like basically being uh tricked by Satan, or we had like there's a church video shown to teens where it's kind of analogized to a war, that if you're not being diligent, then like these, arrows from Satan can get you when you're unawares, if you're not like being really vigilant about your testimony and stuff. And so I thought that all the things that the church was teaching me was setting me up for success, same as you, that I did trust Mormon boys more than non-Mormon boys. And I just thought that they were inherently safer because they had the same morals and were growing up with these same morals and values that I was. And I, I'm I've never been assaulted, but out of all my Mormon friends, um, so many of them have had like their first sexual experiences were non-consensual, or yeah, non-consensual. There were, and a lot of it's just hard because we're not even taught that in the first place. So the fact that so many would have a non-consensual experience but then not know it or still blame themselves and find themselves at fault, like all of that's really common. But they were all from Mormon boys, like uh, that was my crowd. So it's just, I don't know, it was just sad to me, the more I got older, and, the more roommates and friends and stuff, when we have these kinds of conversations, to find out that, and a lot of times nothing ever happened. On another channel that I'm on with Jean Latter Daily Digest, we interviewed this wonderful girl, and she was like pretty violently assaulted by the son of a ward leader, and he still was cleared to serve a mission, and have callings and all that. He's so far, as far as I know, as far as she knows, and she reported, like there have never been any consequences, and she knows she's not the only person in his ward that he assaulted. And it's just these systems, like you said, or the trad wife, these conservative religious systems really set up almost a haven for abuse. And I know if our target audience is watching, which is anyone that is wanting to live the trad life lifestyle. I did that again. Trad wife lifestyle. This might sound really difficult to hear, and it might sound and seem completely unbelievable, but because these things are so important, I would hope that you can hold at least some space in your heart to consider that it might be true, and just be open to data and research on that, because you only protect yourself and your children by doing that. I wanted to briefly touch on the promiscuity, risky sex, STDs, and abortion. These were all things I remember seeing as basically as a result of premarital sex, or infidelity, and just loose morals. But the more data I've learned about, just what's actually happening on the ground, versus again the ideals, because what we think about doesn't always match reality. And so it's the states in the United States that have the most conservative um, government structures, and that are more religious. They are the ones that, because a lot of times they don't really like sex ed, they will teach abstinence only sex ed. These states will have higher rates of promiscuity. They have higher rates of STDs because of this, lack of education. They have higher rates of teen pregnancies, and they have higher rates of abortion than, like I guess I'm trying to avoid being political, but it's a red and blue divide, to be honest. So the more I guess liberal, or more, I don't know what the
Non
word. Yeah,
the non-religious, more secular states that don't make decisions around conservative Christianity. That's the differentiating factor there. And maybe, and I think
yeah,
that it's really important to point out too that, because whenever I tell my story and talk about different statistics on my channels, then people will say, well, that didn't just happen to you, or that doesn't just happen to people because you married a religious guy, Mormon, Christian, whatever he may have been. There's bad apples everywhere.
bad apples. Yeah,
It is really, really, really important to underscore the fact that the traditional family that I found myself in, that so many girls around the world are getting married, and it's supposed to be for time and all of eternity, or till death do us part, and just that one partner, and you're getting married very young, and the husband's going out and working, and the wife is staying home, everything that we're talking about in this actually creates these things exponentially more than in these non-traditional families. And I talk about in my own life how that if I hadn't been in that traditional family where I was financially dependent on my husband and where I believed that I couldn't divorce him because Heavenly Father had like sealed our marriage in the Mormon temple for time and all eternity. So I couldn't really like escape that. I had covenanted with God that I was going to be there forever. Because of that, I was not able to leave the relationship when I found out that my husband had been cheating on me for 22 years. I have a really sad Substack article on my life take too. I know I've referred to a couple. It's my trad wife trap where I talk about the very day 22 years into my marriage, having raised 5 kids together. My son was on his Mormon mission at the time, and I was recovering from my ovarian tumor that I found out that my husband had had this whole double life, all the promiscuity. And in addition to that, he had assaulted me. He was abusive to me throughout our whole entire marriage. And because I was financially dependent on, because we were in this traditional family structure, I wasn't able to leave at all. I couldn't change locks. I couldn't go anywhere. I had to stay. And that's the most important bit of this. Yeah, there's bad guys out there who've never set foot in a church their whole entire lives. There's great guys that go to church. There are marriages that are religious, that are beautiful and thriving, but these traditional family structures have more of this exponentially than marriages in which the either one, husband or wife, has the freedom to leave and has the finances to create another life on the other side and has some independence and autonomy.
That's perfect. I just want to add one more thing onto that. One of the biggest factors to all of these things happening is shame, because it's such an ideal, and so when it's failing for you, nobody wants to talk about it. And I mean, the purity culture and sexual shame really is, I think, especially with young guys, and especially if you're in a culture where I think most trad wife type of cultures will look down on things like masturbation, but it's something that teenagers do. And so it just starts this shame cycle that really actually increases the amount of, the amount that they'll act out sexually. And there's
Mhm.
also just there's an entitlement towards women, I think, when they are married, but I don't wanna get too far into the weeds here, but shame is around based around a lot of these things, so especially, like, with the sex stuff, abortions, like, teen pregnancy, both of them is because, well, there's a lot of shame because someone has acted outside of the, um parameters of what they're supposed to. So it's either, secret abortion, so that you don't tell anybody that you had one, because of course you'll be shamed for that and the sexual promiscuity. But then if you do the right thing according to these cultures and never abort, but go ahead, now you're a pariah for being a teen mom. And so there's still not much support there. There's a lot of heavy judgment. And then we didn't touch on this last part here, the ostracization of non-conforming family members. That includes teens, maybe a teen pregnancy that can get somebody kicked out of a home. I know someone that happened to. She was 15, and it was because she wanted to keep the baby. Her mom was just like, "Well, then you want to be a grown up, you do it on your own," and that's really sad. But then also LGBTQ family members. I think that's the biggest one that I know. I know in Utah, there's a high percentage of the homeless teen population come from Mormon families, and they are LGBTQ. And so I know, and Mormons will respond to this by saying, like, no, we don't teach that. We don't tell parents to shun their LGBTQ kids or this and that. But in these cultures, your kids reflect you, and so it doesn't have to be a teaching for you to be so ashamed and angered at a kid that is not that is an embarrassment to you, that these things still happen anyway. It doesn't have to be in black and white in the teachings anywhere for something to be like a very common part of a culture, because of this basis of just everything that is wrapped up into the um, traditional family lifestyle.
Absolutely. And I've heard too many stories as an XMO content creator from LGBTQ people who have been ostracized by their families, as well as seeing just so much data. You cannot argue that LGBTQ members of the Mormon church are not ostracized. They are. The data supports it, and there are just too many people out there sharing their
Yeah.
stories.
I want a family thing. I want to touch on that too, because there is all this focus on, we're family oriented. We care about these kinds of relationships. I don't know how many people. I think I've said this earlier, but parents and spouses to each other, how many are able to improve and say they have stronger relationships and foundations after they leave these kinds of traditions, that they're able to have more real authentic relationships and appreciate the other people in their lives for who they are rather than for the role that they're supposed to play, or the way that who they are reflects on me, whether it's my partner or whether it's a child. And a lot of times the family bonds that are so touted in these are actually really shallow. And I think both of us maybe can uh, speak to that personally. Both of us I mean, I ostracize some of my family members, and for me, it's due to their toxicity. But then I've also had some of them cut me off, and they would probably say the same. And it's they think that we have these very different religious morals, but if anything, I feel like I'm more in line with my conscience and morals than ever before. So yeah, and we're non-conforming, so and we're out.
Yep, we're out.
Yeah.
And I was a mom who was a member of the Mormon Church for many years, and that's how I raised my kids. Like, I ostracized my son for, like, kissing his girlfriend and dating a non-member, and, I certainly treated my older kids who were raised in the church very differently than my younger kids. And just on that topic of the authenticity and the true connective relationships, now that I'm not looking at my kids every day and thinking, are they sinning? Are they keeping the commandments? Am I, as a mom, keeping them on the straight and narrow and doing all the things that the church tells me that I have to do to make sure that they have these beautiful, righteous lives and then can die and go to the celestial kingdom, which is just so much pressure. And then as a parent, it led to me constantly like analyzing my kids all the time. What's the word that knitting cult lady always talks about? Like, um, oh, what is it? When you're observing people, like Big Brother, like spying on them. I can't think of the word right off the top of my head, but like I was always just like a hawk
Uh,
watching my kids to make sure that they were being surveillance.
Surveilling? I
Yeah.
don't know. Is that the word?
Yes, as a mom, it was my job to perform this surveillance for Heavenly Father and make sure that my kids were righteous all the time and keeping them on that straight and narrow path. So now that that garbage is all out of my life and I'm no longer worried about their religion or their morals, I'm trying to teach them just to be good, kind humans and to live sustainable lives and be authentic. Like, I certainly don't want my children to harm other people or harm themselves, but I now have such completely different relationships with my two youngest that are still at home. So close, so authentic. And I'm not worrying, I'm not surveying them. I'm not looking at like, and how are they making me look to the rest of the church? Like, one of my daughters who's like dyed her hair black, it's like, oh my God, like what are the other people gonna think when my little blondie is going goth? All
Mhm.
of that's gone, and I now have these close connective relationships with my kids in ways that I never did with my bunch that I raised in the church. And it's sad because I can't go back. I can't go back and be the mom that I am today for those two that I raised in the church.
I lived for I lived for a bit with my brother, who's still very much in, and my niece and nephew. They're very young. My nephew's 4 and my niece is 2, and they're so adorable, and I love them so much. And they have like very distinct and different personalities. And so my nephew is actually, he's a bit more on the sensitive side. He's very smart. He learned the alphabet from just like from kids' TV shows, which they I never did. I had to, like, really specifically be taught it, but he just, like, rattled it off to us one day. None of us, like, ever practiced or even sang the song to him, and he just went off with it, and it was pretty amazing. So he's a smart kid, he's sensitive, and my niece she's a little bit of a brute, and she's really sassy, and I love it. I love it so much when she's, like, unadulterated herself. And I do worry. I just hope they both keep who they are, because there's just things about that. I mean, there is a sensitivity. They do allow Mormon men, so that's good. I don't think that'll be like, like beat out of my nephew or anything. But I am super worried about my niece, that she'll be really kind of boxed in and get that sass out of her. But and she's just really unique. But anyway, I don't know. She makes me laugh, and a lot of times when she does something that's really unexpected, I guess I just get a kick out of it. And I think that's more where, like, you can find joy in children and, like, for things like that when you're just open and you just, see what happens versus, in this kind of a culture, like, she's already not acting the way women should act. So, you know, if I were to step into that kind of parenting role, like, I would already start to be a little concerned, like, she doesn't like playing with dolls. Let's get her more dolls. Let's, like, really kind of try to push it. Do you want this doll? How about we play with this instead of the monster truck? Like, those are your brother's toys, but she loves his monster trucks and she loves dinosaurs. And, like, when the Mario movie came out, I would have all been all about Princess Peach because, yeah, like, she's the girl, I'm the girl. But no, like, my niece's favorite character was Bowser, and she's got a Bowser action figure. She thinks he's a dinosaur. It's close enough, he basically is. But yeah, like, one of the last times I went over, she, like, brought this thing out and she was going "Rawr," and then anyway, I just love it, and I just love her for who she is, and I hope she can keep that. So, yeah. I think we're good on this. Should we move on to the next one?
Let's do it.
Okay. Alrighty. Feminine identity and empowerment. So, this is a very narrowly defined femininity and it cuts out and diminishes a lot of other valid expressions. It's never empowering to feel like you constantly fail to measure up to one, ideal if it doesn't fit you. Um, the I put performative versus authentic femininity because again, I think this is something that is really individual to different women. So if you're having to pretend like you are a woman that you are not, in order to present as feminine to your culture, then it's just not real and it's really disempowering. Um, so I wrote, it's a facade of empowerment against the world, but here's the thing: is it always stops at your spouse because you're supposed to be submissive. Your husband is the leader. Any authority figures, which is church, but also secular, law, civics, etc., and the community at large. You're not empowered to um, go against the grain, really. It's a system of comparison and conformity instead of authenticity and diverse talents and gifts. And your self-esteem depends on external factors. It's tied to how well those around you feel like you are performing this femininity correctly. Um, let's talk about this because as you and I were talking before, you were saying you this was something that was easier for you that you shined in, was I really struggled, especially in looks, because that's, honestly, a lot of that femininity comes down to how you look. If you can have your hair done nice and your makeup done nice and you've got cute clothes, and you do all of these things, a lot of maintenance and a lot of work on appearance. But that was always just extremely difficult for me to really understand. It's like just a foreign language, I think, to me that I just never quite got. But you said this was an area that you could excel, but I guess it's still, there was still, I guess, a dark side to that for you too, right?
Well, this is where I thrived. Like, when it's funny because, again, going back to like being a 19, 20-year-old girl and buying into this whole traditional family program that my church and my community and my family was teaching me, this is one area where it's like, yes, I can do that. And like you say, like part of when we talk about the performance femininity, it does come down to, are you a certain body type? Are you a certain, like, maybe you just have kind of a decent face and you look good in a skirt type of thing? This performance femininity has a very narrow little box. Like Hannah Neeleman, why is she so popular? There's all kinds of other homesteaders that are out there with cute little kitchens and fancy stoves and kids running around, but they aren't itty bitty with, good boobs and blonde hair and the big blue eyes and smile. Like Hannah's hot. She kind of fits that type. Nara Smith is gorgeous. She's a supermodel. St. Williams, she's beautiful. She's a beautiful girl. She just kind of fits that type. And so this feminine identity. So for me growing up, I really bought into by getting married and buying into these gender roles and being the mommy, staying at home and decorating the house, then I get to step into something that, first of all, my whole entire life, that's all I was raised for. I was big sister. I had a whole entire family of these Mormon women who were very crafty and really good at cooking, and were also, I just had beautiful genes in my background. And I found myself as this little newlywed at like 100 pounds with a double D bra, blonde, platinum hair down to my butt, big blue eyes. And I could cook and I was fertile. I was popping out babies all over the place. And we had the money and I had the big, gorgeous home. And there was something about that that felt so good. And I think it's really interesting psychologically now that I'm no longer in that, how that performance femininity and that feeling of stepping into female power as just the right wife and mom, it has the same feeling as maybe being like Taylor Swift on a smaller scale, where I'm on that stage and people are looking at my beautiful children as we walk down the aisle of church on Sunday. And they're looking at me and my cute husband as we go for a walk around the block in the evenings. And they see me driving my cute little cars with the baby seat in the back. And they see me teaching in Relief Society or serving as the primary president. And it has really the same feeling as if you've ever performed anything else. Like, I don't know, it's kind of narcissistic in a lot of different ways. And it just kind of feeds your ego. It gives you a sense of satisfaction. And I thought that was the best part of my life. Like, look at me. I had social media followers on my blog and stuff. I was a Mormon mommy, homesteader, influencer with 5 kids and the big house and all the money and the cute husband who was also super abusive. It's like, look at me. I'm nailing life. I'm doing
Living the
exactly
dream.
what yeah, living the dream, doing what Heavenly Father wants me to do. I'm setting the example. I'm the light on the hill for all of the other people. But behind closed doors, it was actually really miserable. And that's where I got into some real cognitive dissonance because even to my own self, it's like, this is amazing. This looks so good. Like there's this feeling that you have walking down the aisle of Target in your high heeled shoes in the $1 million communities up in Mesa, Arizona, and driving the fancy cars with all little babies and stuff. Like there's this feeling you get like the crowd is applauding you.
Mm.
But then at the end of the day, it's so disconnecting because there's really nothing to it. It's just the same feeling as getting that applause and getting the accolades. And I also got the accolades from the people at church, from my bishops and my grandparents. And when we went to the temple together, like everybody's like applauding you. But beneath the surface, I knew myself that I was completely empty. That was a facade.
Wow.
It wasn't who I actually was. And the other thing about this feminine identity and empowerment is if you step outside at all of who people see you as. So if I wasn't Mason Mormon Barbie mommy, if for some reason I decided, hey, I'm going to wear like cut off shorts and hike every day, I went through this hiking phase. I started to get feedback from the girls in my neighborhood like, Jenny, what are you wearing? What are you doing with your hair lately? Why do you never wear makeup? And Maven, these were actual conversations. I had friends who were so concerned about me because I went through this whole phase where I was just hiking every single day. I have a hiking TikTok. I did sponsored hiking. I stepped out of the little Mormon mommy box and decided I'm going to enjoy my life and do something that's not necessarily feminine. And I got a lot of pushback about it. People asked me what I was wearing all the time, like, Jenny.
I just realized something as you were talking. I mean, and I did put this in there. The performance aspect, basically everything comes from the outside. Your femininity is something. It's almost like a card or a pass that your culture and your community, your traditional community is giving you. It's whether you're measuring up or not.
Well,
And I find that I again and because I struggled with these really traditionally feminine things, basically all of them. I'm a very terrible cook. I'm at least a little bit better at dressing myself and putting on makeup. Maybe not today, but I'm at least more capable than I used to be. And so, yeah, so I struggled with the idea of living up and always kind of feeling like I'm failing in this area. And I have to say that outside of that culture, I've been able to uh, take on femininity is for me like who I am and how I present it. And no one else's femininity needs to be the same as mine, but I feel actually happy and proud to be a woman, not just anyone, but the woman that I am more now than I ever could because there's so much you're in a system that relies on that feedback to tell you if you're if you're making it or not, or if you were feminine or not. And I still get feedback, especially as a public figure, on ways that I'm failing, men's opinions of my life, but they don't matter to me. When opinions come in like that, they don't tear me down in a way that they would if I was still in that culture, because it means something in that culture. And now that it doesn't matter if someone else doesn't think I'm feminine, like, I'm female, I'm feminine. I define that for myself. And even like, I mean, first of all, I think I express femininity along a much wider range because I can conceive of it in a much wider range by being able to have different rules, especially like around modesty. I've been able to find clothes that fit me and my body type much better. And for me, like sleeveless things, especially in a dress, so like kind of a V-neck type thing without sleeves, does a whole lot of good work for me and my figure and my body. And so I tried on a dress at Goodwill. It was brand new. It was only $10. It would not have been a church appropriate dress, but the I've never felt like so good looking, and it just did so much for me. Whereas normally in these modest type outfits, I look really frumpy. It really makes me look way more. This dress, I swear, took 10 pounds off of me. And I was so staggered that it was like the first time in a long time I felt cute, in a dress. And so, yeah, so obviously I bought it and it's my favorite dress today. But also on the other end of things, I had to do a car repair, more out of just to save money. I got the part myself. I YouTubed it to make sure, it wasn't something that required any extensive training or tools that I didn't have, and it seemed doable. So I did it. It took me a long time. Many swear words were had. I was covered in, my hands in grease and dirt and stuff from the ground from, getting underneath the car. And it's hot and sweaty, and I looked a mess. But when I finished and I had done it, I just felt so proud of myself, and just like, like I can do things myself and I don't have to, give it to other people to do. I mean, I can, but I don't know. And I felt feminine. I felt like this wasn't a man thing that I just did. Like, there's no, I did, it's me. I'm not a man. I'm a woman. I did it and it served me and helped me. And so I just feel like I have just such a broader range, and I'm so much happier. And just the feeling of being feminine again, now that it's within me and it's coming within me, people can't take that away. And that's just not, I never had that before, and I don't think I couldn't have that before. And maybe some women can, but that's kind of what we're facing here.
That is
Anything
super
else, Jenny?
like, you gave me goosebumps the whole entire time. I don't know, Maven, it just doesn't make sense to me now that I'm outside of the church that we even have like masculine and feminine as verbiage at all, because like I always assumed that like all of the domestic things and cooking and all of that, that was feminine. Those were feminine jobs. I had been created with, I don't know, better taste buds or better olfactory senses that I could smell and do a better job of cooking dinner. And then I started to realize all of the chefs out there are men. There aren't that many female chefs. So men are really good cooks, and that's a masculine thing if they're getting paid for it. But if I'm
Mhm.
cooking in my home, that becomes a feminine thing. I think that humans have so much more complexity. We shouldn't label anything as masculine or feminine. If you have the capacity to fix your car, then that is a beautiful self-expression of a human being able to problem solve. Let's get rid of the whole gendered thing. That's my vote.
Yeah, yeah, same. Because it's same with like men can be very nurturing. There are not very many like male elementary school teachers, but they're very valuable and just as capable as the female teachers. There's it kind of it goes both ways. And so yeah, I hate that both sides are we should never look down on someone for having a trait or a skill because of the gender they have, where it's like the wrong one. If you're a nurturing or caring person, that's great. Male or female, like it doesn't matter. That's a great skill to have. Yeah.
Like it's very problematic in the traditional family that we're dialoguing about, because in my home there were certain skills that I was supposed to have. Like Jake expected me to be pretty and cook and take care of the kids and do the homework and make the house beautiful. And again, I'd been raised that I could nail that and do those things. But then I was never allowed to develop. And I found myself when I left the church almost just like I had been like arrested development. I hadn't
Yeah.
matured in all of these other ways. I hadn't like those were his jobs, so I wasn't allowed to do them. I wasn't supposed to do them. I had no self expression in categories that weren't just classically feminine according to Mormon culture and community.
A lot of it is looks based and youth based, youth fertility, right? Because it's about your womb, it's about bearing children, and so younger is the ideal. That's what they want. But none of us can stay young forever. And so when you in a culture where like that is always valued, I know that as someone who is single but still trying to date, the older I got, like the older the men were that I was looking for. But if you looked at like their preferences, their age preferences, the older men got, they still want that young age. So it's
You
sad to think,
know,
yeah, that just that men would lose interest in you, but it happens all the time. And because that's what's valuable. So once you're older, you are not the valuable woman, in traditional cultures. You've aged out of that prime time where the men all want you. So, yeah.
and the men can get as old and frumpy as they want, and we don't care. Maybe I
Mhm.
get bullied so much for like neck wrinkles. Like I have 4 neck wrinkles, and I get bullied for my neck all the time.
Oh, I'm
Ages
sorry.
I'm grandma, but yeah, we value women who are younger. But I mean, we're teaching people how to treat us. So we just stop caring about that. We stop buying into it and we build our own lives and problem solved. I think that we
Yeah.
as humans should be able to, within our relationships, explore activities, passions, purpose, and really tap into our skills, which may or may not fit under our genders. Okay, tradition and community. Community comes at cost of conformity. Yeah, we were kind of just talking about that, huh? Like these
Mhm.
things overlap. Failed support networks cure worse than disease. Some communities make the problems worse. Not all past traditions serve present circumstances. And Maven, to me, that is the most important one when we're talking about tradition within community. Not all past traditions serve present circumstances. And then the final one there is the isolation, loneliness, loss of former robust support systems. So, yeah, again, like I got married thinking I'm going to have all of this community, the picket fence and the neighborhoods, and I'm doing what my grandmothers did. And this is tradition. We're going all the way back to Adam and Eve and Heavenly Father. He was married. Like, this is a tradition and it's going to give me this beautiful diverse tribal system, but all of these factors here on our terrible list are certainly a major part of the traditional families.
So I studied cultural anthropology. That is what my degree is in, and this was one of the most shocking discoveries for me in studying was that this idea of the nuclear family just always being the traditional and natural, and like you said, going back to Adam and Eve, that's always how it's been. That's not true, and it was genuinely a modern creation. This idea of just husband, wife, and kids. Communities were much broader, much more expanded, and this nuclear family ideal is not ideal at all. It creates almost all of the problems that we've been talking about here are kind of a natural result of this kind of family system. I had a hard time understanding, like, how could it be anything else besides just father and mother and kids? First of all, multi generations would all be together or very close together. So you have that. Um, when you have other family members around, abuse rates go down because you're visible and you're seen. When you're in this nuclear home and you're not in the community, what goes on in the home is private. And that's where the abuse happens. That's where the neglect happens. This is where all of these crimes and really horrific things happen, is in this isolation and separation from the community at large.
for the average Joe living out on a homestead like that, it is incredibly isolating. My ex-husband and I bought a homestead. We did our own little ballerina farm thing back before TikTok was even a thing. I had a radio show and a podcast and an entire brand built around homesteading and sourdough and being the little Mormon wife to all the kids and stuff. And your entire day from sun up to sundown is just being at home with the kids, getting them to their sports and different things. And I remember feeling during that phase of my life very much like if I just went missing, nobody would even know except for my kids. Like I didn't have a job that I had to show up to. I didn't necessarily have social connections where I was interacting with people on a daily basis. It was me and my kids in this little farmhouse in the middle of the country. And I do my radio show and things like that. But I wasn't actually part of any community outside of just the people at church and my husband and my kids. And it was so isolating. I have pages and pages and pages of my diaries talking about how deeply, deeply lonely I was because I was disconnected. I was absolutely, utterly disconnected. Most people living with their kids out in the country or even living in the suburbs, just raising kids all day and having to be home for nap time and taking care of your house behind, your little picket fence in the suburbs can be extremely isolating. We no longer have the social structures that society had one generation ago, two generations ago, three generations ago that keeps us tied closely together. So for today's trad wife, you're going to stay home and most of your friends are just going to be online. You might be on Facebook groups, you might be Snapchatting your friends, but you're not going to have that community that other women have.
I was gonna say too, isolation and loneliness, it can be a physical thing, where physically you don't have people around you, but you can also be incredibly isolated and lonely and be surrounded by people. And I think that goes back to again the authenticity. If you have a culture that allows free expression and allows people to be who they are, then you can make these genuine connections and you don't have to because you don't have to be performing. So when things are really rough for you, there's nothing, stopping you from being able to show that and share that and comfort each other. And these cultures, I mean, I would have thought that Mormons are great at comforting each other and helping each other out. Like that's our whole thing. That's our whole shtick. But again, it's only it's certain we love to help out people that we love and that look like us and act like us and contribute the way that we're expecting them to contribute. If you deviate a little bit, or if you're seen as any problem that you're going through as something as a result of your actions that maybe weren't aren't typically looked upon favorably, then there is no help. I'll say the teen pregnancy is an example. Like abortion is bad in these cultures, but having the baby is you're still a pariah. You're still, when you struggle, there's kind of this idea that, it will help some, will help with diapers or something, but you should struggle because you messed up. And so you need to pay this price. And that's coming from your community, and I see so much more help with these kinds of things in communities outside of the one that I grew up in that are feminist and not, not this kind of traditional version because I don't have an expectation of how people should be for me to care about them or care about their suffering. That I have to feel like I have to make sure it wasn't their fault and it's truly circumstantial that, this happened to them or this person did this to them. But, if they did it to themselves, then like, I'm not going to do anything about it. It's really different. And so I think the community aspect of it, and I know so many stories of times where the community fails where you think that they're going to be there for you, you have been doing all the right things, and yet sometimes a problem of yours is just too big, for them to really want to rally around, and that can feel very sad to know that you've invested so much, you've put a lot into your community because you always thought, it goes around, what goes around comes around. This is how we want to live. These are our values. We're here for each other. And then yet when you need help the most, that's when you're abandoned or left alone. I've seen that happen a lot. And I didn't bring this up in the with the morals and values, about the non-conforming um, ostracization. One of the things that I've seen that the most in is mothers with children with special needs. Um, I've seen them be failed over and over and over by wards and communities, because
Maven,
it's uncomfortable. Yeah, and it's different, and we
but
don't know how to deal.
say too that when you have a community that's built on all of these traditional families, then you're getting married really young. You aren't getting an education. You aren't developing life skills like you should before you get married. And like I just look back on my whole life. I was married by the time I was 20. I had my first baby when I was 22. I would have 5 kids under the age of 11 by the time I was, what, 34 years old. And I was drowning in my life. Like I was trying to obey all the commandments. I had all the food storage. So I was grinding the wheat to make the pancakes, going out and taking the eggs out from under the chickens. And then I had to drive to a dairy 3 days a week to get the raw goat milk because heaven forbid that my kids drink pasteurized milk. And my life was just so overwhelming. And then just all of this stress with my relationship and showing up for my husband and trying to keep myself stick skinny and have all like the cutest clothes and the high maintenanceness of extensions and eyelashes and sunless tanning and having my teeth bleached and just all of that pressure of being the hot Mormon mommy. I didn't have time to breathe. I didn't have time to like sit down on a toilet and fully empty my bladder or eat a meal. Then on top of that already extremely stressful life, I had the church just sucking time out of me. The day before my first son was born, the Mormon bishopric came over to my house in suits and ties. I don't know if you've ever heard this story on my TikToks. I'm madder about this than anything else that ever happened to me. All the things that the Mormon church did to me. They knew I was being induced the next day. They came over and they said, "We are changing the reliefs or the young women's presidency up. We'd like you to be the first counselor in a huge young women's organization." I was 22 years old. I didn't plan to go to church for like 3 months. It's my first baby. I'm like, I don't want to drag a baby to church. I need time. It was the one time in my life that like I don't have to go to church right now. I am having a baby and I'm going to stay home with my baby on Sundays. And they talked me into being the first counselor in this young women's organization. Huge. It was like a double young women's organization where we had so many kids, Gilbert, Arizona. And so on top of all of that stuff, now I'm doing Wednesday night activities. I had to wean my baby so that I could go to girls camp the next summer. I was teaching young women's lessons. We were having planning meetings. We were doing all of the, young women's and excellence. And I was just so overwhelmed that if I had a neighbor that I knew had a special needs child and maybe she just needed a break once in a while, I couldn't even like think of taking the time to walk 2 doors over, knock on somebody's door and say, "Hey, would your little guy like to come hang out? I'll keep an eye on him while you just run to Costco by yourself." I could not even imagine helping my sister as she was having her new babies, like, "Hey, I'll come clean your house, I'll do something for you." I did not have time to do anything. How was I going to help other people? And that's the unfortunate reality of the Mormon church and some of the evangelical communities. And when you get into these neighborhoods and these enclaves that are full of the other traditional families, they are all so overwhelmed with their children's activities and then the church on top of it and everything else that they're trying to do that they really can't show up for one another. They are vastly over capacity in their lives.
You brought up a good point, that, and I'm glad you said it because the way I said it almost looks like, these communities don't really care about you. But it's it,
They
it's a
can't.
bandwidth issue. They can't care, and I
Yes.
just it made me remember, like I felt that way a lot when I was, fully in and believing and trying to live my life. I would sometimes have a thought of like, man, I don't feel like I'm serving enough or helping enough, and but when I would try to think about who I could serve, or sometimes I would know like, I should reach out to this person or I should offer this thing. it just like my anxiety levels, I could tangibly rise because I would just be like, okay, when am I going to do that? Or how am I going to, because when you have to be everything wrapped up in one person, just nobody can do that. And again, this is another area where I feel like outside of these communities, um, th- you can have like these better family systems and support systems because not everyone has to have all the same things and be all the same things. So you can discard the things that aren't you, that don't serve you, that take up mental space and energy without giving much back. That's a burden that you can get off of your shoulders and let go of, and that frees you up for so much more love and service. And I like as an auntie, I love my nieces and nephew. I have a niece that's severely disabled, and I have done a lot in her life. I even took a reduced hours one summer so that I could be her primary caretaker while my brother and sister-in-law worked, because she had a lot of needs. So it was difficult to find a daycare that would take care of her, especially, if there's a lot of other kids around. She just has to be constantly supervised. And it's and I loved doing that. And I have the capacity again as a single woman to do that because I'm not doing I don't have my own kids and my own husband and family. I would not have been able to do that for her, for my brother's kid. It's because I'm single. Like it's seen as such a detriment in these societies to not have children and to not be married. But I
Well,
think I'm an
American.
ad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can benefit so much by having, some additional time and energy to help with other people's children. And I love doing that for both of my brothers in ways that I could, significant resources that I wouldn't expect a community member to do, because they're my family and I love them. And so it's definitely, yeah, I was able to do these things, and especially with my youngest brother that I was living with, the kids were young. Like it's because I'm single and I was able to help out, and I loved that. So
You're modeling historic tribal behavior.
yeah.
Again, everyone couldn't have had babies all in the same year because they would have to go gather resources and make sure that they could survive. So maybe one person would have a baby this year and two people would have a baby the next year and everybody would work together. And why is it that women who don't have children are devalued? Simply because nations and religious organizations are hyper focused on membership expansion. It's
Mhm.
actually more healthy for tribes to have single women and single men and people who have less children or no children or whatever than it is to have everybody being in that nuclear family model because like you say you are able to contribute your resources to that child who needs more resources as a single auntie who's very loving and dotes on those kiddos, where if you had your own nuclear family, well, you would add 5 more kids to the Mormon church. And that's what their real focus is. As everybody talks about the declining population, JD Vance with this whole single cat ladies don't even deserve
Mhm.
to have a say in politics. Why? Because if we as women aren't using our wombs to expand the population of America to keep the capitalistic engine running, then they don't value us.
Yeah.
So,
It's
and
sad. And it's
and
and it's just so not true.
yeah, the single woman has so much more value in nature than the woman with the kids. Like the woman with the kids, that's a liability.
Yeah. And
It's
when you're
just
looking at it, like, from a child-centric point of view, I know, like, within Mormonism and, as I was looking at my future as a mom and just seeing, like, look, that we value kids and we want more of them and, all of this, but the reality for the children is, I mean, when you're having more than you're capable of, you're they have a worse experience. I did not have a good childhood. I had a better one, like, than my mom did, and kudos to her for that, but she didn't have the resources. She didn't have the mental and emotional resources. It's that young marriage, like you were talking about. It's just, yeah, like there's just a lot working against that. And so when you do look at more traditional cultures, where aunties are more involved and grandparents are more involved, you've got all of these things, fewer children. You might have fewer children, but they are much better taken care of and they're much healthier and they grow up to be part of the society. And people, like, to go back to the financial stability. my brother's the breadwinner, like, in his family, as he should be. My sister-in-law stays home. Um, I got my brother into a house during COVID. It was originally my idea. I had to work for it. I the down payment came from me. The majority of like the paperwork and a lot of the hustling, I did all that groundwork to be able to make that happen. And luckily, like we were able to get in kind of right before house prices really skyrocketed. And so like my brother, like, I first of all, like, I'm not in a position that I'll ever be able to do that again. I was back then, and I'm happy for it. I'm happy to help put a roof over my, nibblings' heads. I want that for them, but the truth is my brother would not have been able to do that on his own. He wouldn't have done it, and he where he was living before was, this little apartment, little basement apartment, and, it was noisy upstairs. My sister-in-law didn't like it, and it was incredibly expensive. My brother was not able to save it all. In fact, he was overdrafting every month, which became a problem in trying to get this house, because we were going in together with, our credit scores and whatnot, and that bank statement was really troubling. And so like, I had to do a lot of extra for work to work around that and able to be able to get this house. So like, yeah, like to say that like because I don't have my own kids, I can't be invested in, you know, the future of the country. First of all, that's not true. I could have got myself a house, but I'm glad they do. I probably never will have a house at this point, but that's okay. And so like that's a level of like financial stability in their marriage that I directly contributed to as a single person that they
Well,
would not have had without me. So again, just the having it all on the guy. If my sister-in-law was just relying on my brother, she would be worse off. Simplicity is often illusion. This is the real side to it. There's a lot of pressure to hide or to show wealth, so we'll talk about that. Again, more conformity, and then the structural costs often are higher than savings. So sometimes going back to the roots, the simplicity. Jenny, you'll be able to talk about this more. The price of the chicken coop, does it even out and make it the eggs worth it? Um, Adding a lot of times it adds complexity by doing everything yourself and adding more steps to normal everyday activities that can take from other things that might be more meaningful. And then it's a permanent mental space in survival mode. You're constantly dealing with food and shelter on a day-to-day basis, and it's difficult to move above and beyond that. I'm going to turn this, yeah, to you, Jenny, because I think you've got a lot of personal
well,
experience with this.
there's so much dialogue right now about how the wife life looks so beautiful, and I see this word simple all the time. When I do videos that are like cooking in the kitchen and I'm wearing my apron and stuff, or if you read on Ballerina Farm or some of the other big trad wives online, it's that simple life that's being sold that just makes us think like our modern world right now is so complex and it's so busy and so haggard, and going out and being a working woman and having my own life out there is so complicated. If I just get married and have babies and buy a little homestead outside of Park City, Utah, and get a couple chickens and a goat and a sourdough start, then I'm living the simple life again. And I think that it is one of the biggest hoaxes in this whole entire trad wife thing, because that simple life is not simple at all. And I remember thinking that when I was getting married, like, oh, it's, really easy to keep a schedule with babies and we're going to have nap time and feeding time. And you don't realize the sheer amount of labor that goes into one child, two children, three children, and all of the laundry and all of the upkeep. It's the most exhausting life. If I had just had a job and gone to work every day, I would have been far more relaxed and had more simplicity than keeping up in a massive $5,000 or 5,000 square foot $1 million home with five different kids that had different activities and all the laundry and all of that other stuff. And another aspect of what we're seeing online projected as this trad wife life is a lot of camera angles and a lot of like cutting stuff out, editing things that are left on the editing room floor that we don't see behind the camera. And I'm sorry, but Ballerina Farm is the worst for this. She looks like this cute little Oklahoma girl with her cute little simple little pajamas on, and she's just in there kneading the sourdough, and everything looks so simplistic. But what you don't see is great grandpa's huge empire of little convenience stores that he worked for decades and decades to have the money for David Neilman to then become the Steve Jobs of the airlines. All of the hours of work that have gone into his multiple airlines with JetBlue and Breeze, etc., all of the education, all of the training, and then Daniel Neilman marrying Hannah, going down to Brazil, working for 6 years for, I think it was called GHN company, which was a startup for his dad, and all of the labor and preparation that went into them having the $6 million to come to Camas, Utah. And by, again, it looks very simple. Their little farmhouse, I've been there. They purchased it for $2.97 million. And as you know, roughly $3 million, that's not a very simple, attainable price tag for most people. They're hiding a lot of wealth and they're hiding a lot of work. Hannah just actually, it wasn't Hannah that posted this. It was the woman who catered their holiday party. I believe it was Friday night. She posted the huge, elaborate, they did all of these like Dutch ovens and big bonfires, and then they grilled chickens and all kinds of things over this thing. They do this annual Ballerina Farm holiday party every year. And watching the video from the caterer, you see behind the scenes the army of people that are behind that one little video of Hannah's simple life. It is not simple. It's not simple if you're a trad wife influencer. It's not simple if you have any type of media or platforms out there where you're showcasing your family. And it's not simple behind the scenes. Just for myself, if I hadn't been doing anything online, but I was just living my little Mormon traditional family lifestyle, it is the most complicated, exhausting thing that I think that a human being can do. And this simplicity is a lie.
I want to say that in addition to that, I like making bread, but I don't do it like for all my loaves of bread all the time. And I think that I can like making it because it's not a chore that I have to continually keep up and keep going, or, or else I don't have bread. So it's, I wonder if by having to have so much labor, it really maybe decreases the satisfaction of doing a lot of those things potentially. And also, if you don't have a lot of money and an army of people to come and support you, if you get ill or something on a homestead, I mean, it's not just the children, but like you've got animals, you've got to take care of those animals. And that, not just like feeding and watering, and that's can be a lot tougher than people realize if you've never had to feed or water like large animals or a lot of birds, things like that. It's you got to wash out the bucket. You got to make sure that algae isn't growing or mold or things like that. With chicken coops, you got to protect them from predators. Like you can be really really sick and then have like a ruckus outside because a fox has gotten in your hen house, and you got to get it out immediately. You got to save your chickens. It's just there's there's just a lot there that doesn't have a lot of space for downtime or vacation time. You got to make sure these things need constant maintenance. So somebody's got to maintain them. If you lose a worker, if a spouse is out, including like for childbirth. And I think that's something. This is one of the sad things that came out like from Hannah, from the interview that was done with her about just being in bed for days, just so exhausted. And I think for her, maybe that's normal now that there's all this production, and then just crash.
Yeah.
But that's not good. That's not good for her, and I feel bad for her that she has days like that. And um,
Maybe you had mentioned the financial cost too behind that simplicity and like
Mhm.
hiding the wealth that gives that very simple lifestyle. For me, I made all of our food from scratch again. Like I would grind the wheat and we had the chickens and I grew these massive gardens. And I would think to myself, and I'm sure that all of my family around me, they're like, oh, Jenny's really like budget conscious because she's growing her own lettuce and her own kale. And I had all these beets and raspberries and corn and all this stuff. And like, wow, she's really saving money. I would spend thousands upon thousands of dollars having those garden beds dug out, lined with cedar, thousands of dollars on dump trucks full of topsoil, and then all of the fencing and all of the seeds and the sprinkler systems and everything that went into it. Just the chicken.
Fertilizers.
Oh, yeah, the fertilizers, the chicken coop, like, we never broke having those chickens was an absolute luxury by the time you buy the birds and pay for all of their food, and then, like, the food containers and the lights and building the chicken coop and all of the hay that you put in it and all it, like, I don't think that we never broke even on chickens. Like, every time we got an egg, that was probably a $20 egg. So you watch Hannah Neeleman in her kitchen, and it looks like, oh, she's so frugal, she's hardly spending anything. She has her sourdough start, she has a little bag of flour. But if you really pan around what's on the camera there, she's wearing a $500 pair of pajamas. She has a $30,000 Aga stove. Their farm was $3 million. They did another $400,000 worth of remodel. She has the shiplap siding that they added to the kitchen. Their kitchen looked nothing like that. It's not like they just bought a bare bones farmhouse, very simplistic, and they just stuck with it. They spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on that kitchen. And, like, she has her raw milk. She's doing, like, protein shakes and stuff in every single shot these days because that's what they're selling. She
Mm.
goes out to the farm and is like, "Oh, that looks so simplistic. If I was a trad wife, I would have the time to have a cow and live the simple life so I can get free milk in a $5 million dairy." I have no idea. I have not found an estimate on what they spent on all of the cows and the milking equipment. Like, that little thing of milk that she's taken a sip out of is it's a $50 million glass of milk. That's literally what it is. So we're being
Wow.
sold this traditional family lifestyle, and look how simple. I can afford this. I can step out of city life. I can step out of the career, workforce, and all of this complicated, confusing modern stuff. And I can just go live on a very simple little farm. It's it's a lie, Maven.
Yeah. You just can't do it these days without resources, for
Yeah.
sure. And there's nothing inherently wrong with any of these items, like, individually. I actually like a lot of them, but again, it's this idea that, like, you gotta homestead, which means you gotta do all of the things. You need to get your meat source, you need to get your garden, your veggies and stuff, and the mill to grind the wheat, and the food storage, your underground bunker, or wherever you're gonna keep your potatoes and whatnot. It's just, um when you have to do all of it, it again, it's just so much pressure. But wherever you're at, if sustainability is important to you, or if you want to be able to grow your own vegetables for for nutrient, and just because you trust that more, and you don't want to have to rely on the stores as much, like, those are all things that are great. Those are values that I have. I would love to have a garden. I don't want a cow. I know for sure I don't want a cow. I don't want to deal with chickens. But I love the idea of growing my own food and having that kind of self-reliance and sustainability. And like I said, when I make bread, I like making bread when I want to do it. So it's not like that these things that are the things that feminists just hate, and they hate bread baking, and they hate the simplicity. I get more
But
simplicity.
I hate the fact that I spent my life doing those things at the expense of my future. So because I was the free little wifey in the backyard taking care of the chickens, and I didn't have any revenue of my own, I didn't have any education of my own. I was doing those things at the expense of my future because when the
Mm,
marriage ended, I had invested all of my time in things that gave me no financial security, that couldn't actually give my children financial security. And at the end of a 24-year marriage, I was living in my car because I didn't have any real world job skills. And that's the problem with it. If you aren't married, if you're just a single person, you just naturally aren't going to be able to, like, raise the chickens and do all that stuff, or even just having 6 kids by yourself. You're going to have to do the math and figure out, how would I support these children and still get to work and get them to childcare and things like that. We have natural, just, factors in life that we'd have to be dealing with. As a stay-at-home mom, I was able to spend all of my time living this magical life, and I should have just diverted some of my time to educating, making sure that I had my own income, making sure maybe even that my name was on my husband's business and that I was working over there so that when our marriage ended, I would still be able to divide that business and have income for myself. Because when my marriage ended, I was left with less than zero. I owed attorney's fees. I didn't get any type of a settlement. We had no property to divide. We had nothing, and I was just having fun over there. I was I was living my trad wife life at the expense of my future, and all of those things that I did because I valued the homemade food and I valued the time with my children. When that ended, I could no longer spend time with my kids because even to this day, I still work 7 days a week. My kids, 6 years post-divorce, still do without. Our income bracket is still very low, and we're still struggling because I spent all of my time over there doing that. So that's the problem with it.
Yeah.
What's it
It just
coming in?
kind of goes back to the morals and the religion and the family focus. Y we're raised thinking that we've got that on lock and we've got it down pat, but,
Yeah.
really, it takes a lot of learning, some which you can get from other people, and some, unfortunately, we have to learn for ourselves, just how much that isn't true. And it just occurred to me too, another thing, when you're going to daycare, talking about daycare, there's a lot of shame in our community about that. If you put your
Yep.
kids in daycare, you're letting other people raise your children, and you're missing out on this time for your children. But at the same time, it's the same, cultures, these very conservative Christian, typically Republican cultures that will vote for the least amount of assistance to make anything easier or more affordable for parents. So really, I just see over and over and over the people who are claiming to fight for family and care about family do so many things that make motherhood especially difficult, and will have these, and childhood as well, when they're reluctant to fund chip or Medicare, like when it's health and nutrition is so important when kids are little, because I mean this is a foundation for the rest of their life. Like you do not want young kids to struggle or be food insecure and not be getting all the nutrients they need, or be getting cheap crappy food because that's what's affordable. It just kind of astounds me sometimes that or maternity leave and paternity leave also. Why is the US so bad at it when we've got so many people, again, like proclaiming themselves out to be like family warriors? I think it should be obvious then that, yeah, we love mothers and we love children. So we think working mothers should be able to take paid leave when they have a baby. That seems really obvious. But again, it's just the motherhood and it's all in just a very narrow way that they want it to be done. And if you're not doing it that way, which it can be something that is a choice from you, or and that you did, but also just life happens to everybody. Nobody can be perfect. Nobody can do all the right things all the time. And I just wish, I honestly wish that our cultures were better at living up to the values that we profess to have. And so I'll just say that because again, I don't have kids, but all of my friends do. I think I have maybe I'm thinking of one single friend off the top of my head. I have another friend that doesn't have kids, but that was infertility. She desperately, desperately wanted them. And she is married. But everybody else, all of my peers, they're married. They have children, and they've had different things they've gone through, different kinds of struggles, and it just breaks my heart when it seems like they don't get what they need and the children don't get what they need. So anyway, that's my last spiel on that. So that's the end of the list. I guess we can wrap up with any final points that we thought of or want to say. And then I do want to say this was a like broad overview. This is going to be a long episode, but we did hit on all of these different things. We could do a deep dive on a lot of them, and Jenny, you have a lot of content about a lot of these things, but besides just talking about it, you have resources. So I would like to end with uh, I'll give some closing thoughts again to the women that I hope that we reach, and then Jenny, I'd like you to talk about how you like how do we fix it, right? What are some like the actual strategies? What are your programs, and what kinds of things do they help out on? So so my final thoughts, I want to say again, if I were to talk to young me who was looking forward to this lifestyle, and thinking that this was, it feels good, it feels good to talk about it and think about it, and you really feel like you're doing the right thing. If I could, I would just say to really keep your eyes open and care more about results and what's real rather than talk. There's a lot of lovely quotes about motherhood, but what are the statistics? What's hurting and what is helping? And I, I would hope that I would choose to to care more about people and helping versus the dogma that I believed in, and what's right and wrong, and who deserves help and who doesn't, and this, that, or the other thing, who's conforming, who's not, who's an embarrassment, whose children are an embarrassment, et cetera, et cetera. I want to promise that this, the narrative that I grew up with is that like feminists are angry and they're hateful and they want to burn the world down basically, and they hate men and they hate children, and they just want you to be miserable too. They don't want you to be happy in your trad wife lifestyle. They want you to be jealous. They want you to be worldly. All of these things. And so I just want to say, at least speaking for myself, I do not. I do not want those things for me, and I don't want those things for you. I want us all to be able to be happy with who we are, where we are, what we have to contribute, um, to our communities uniquely without judgment, and to be able to do that for other people too, instead of expecting everything from them. Just see what they have, enjoy what they have, build them up, prop them up for what they can do, and what they have that's different, and just like really come together as a community. Again, I've said this throughout, like I feel more feminine now. It's something that's coming from inside of me rather than validation coming externally, so that it's solid, it's secure. And I have so much more self-esteem. I have so much more confidence. I love kids. I love helping out with. I'm an auntie. Like everywhere I go, I pick up nieces and nephews, and I love that. And you can love all of that too. You can have a homestead if that's what you want. You can have the chickens, but just in a realistic way. It's, you have the chickens because that actually serves your lifestyle, and you have the means and resources for it. But you're not going to do the cow, or maybe veggie gardens are not your thing. You're happy to get that from the store. Do what's best for you and your family and your circumstances, regardless of all of these lists and just kind of ideas of, again, externally from these cultures telling you what you should do and what good women, womanhood looks like. If you're a woman, like, you're a woman, that's in you, that's something you define for yourself. And the more you can do that for yourself, the freer and happier you are, often to actually do better at all of the same things. But it just, again, it's coming from the inside rather than the outside. But how do we get there? And final thoughts, I'll turn it to you,
All
Jenny.
right. So, final thoughts. We've covered so many things. And I love the list. I love everything that you've come up with, Maven. This has been such a great dialogue. And thank you for inviting me on to talk about everything that we've covered. When I was going through my divorce court 6 years ago, I had absolutely no money. I was 44 years old. I was sleeping in my car. I couldn't even buy gas. And I know I've talked about this in so many videos on my channel, but sorry, it was super traumatizing. I did a little GoFundMe and I would just text it to friends like, hey, I need to buy some gas money today. I need to buy some groceries. Can you please just donate to my GoFund? Can you Apple Pay me some money? That's how I survived, because when my marriage came crashing down after 24 years of buying into the whole fantasy of the trad wife life, I realized we do not have the legal protections for women that we need to have for people to be doing this. And I related a lot to seatbelts. Like when you get in your car, it's so beautiful to roll your windows down on a sunny day and cruise along some scenic byway, but make sure you have that seatbelt on, because if the car comes crashing to a stop, you're going to need that. And we don't have the family law protections. We don't have the safety nets in place for women to be engaging in these traditional family lifestyles at all. And that became really obvious to me one day in court. when I was standing in front of this commissioner at the Maricopa County Courthouse during my divorce. And she's like, "Can you please explain to me why you are a 45-year-old woman with no education, with no job skills, who's never made a penny of her own money, who doesn't have anything in the bank, who has no credit card, who has nothing? You're basically just a grown baby." And she turned to me and she said, "Why did you decide that it was okay to be a grown adult dependent on this man over here when you look perfectly able bodied?" First of all, like living in the middle of like Gilbert, Arizona, it's like if you never had like the Mormon trad wives before. So I'm standing in there in court, just basically trying to explain to her why I had been drawn into this traditional family lifestyle, because I was obeying Heavenly Father and the prophet, because that's what I thought was the best thing for my family. I would have never ever thought I need to go out and get a job. And standing there in that court that day, it was the first time that I had ever, ever, ever thought, wow, maybe my choice to be a stay at home mom was actually stupid. And it's funny because I was so mad at that commissioner. Like, I remember just like crying and like, she's such a horrible human being. And I quote her all the time now: "No grown adult human being should ever be financially dependent on another grown adult human being." And as we discuss the traditional family and the trad wife lifestyle, the most important factor in all of this is that financial dependency. I should not have had my children's ability to eat, my ability to put gas in my car, my ability to have a home to live in. I shouldn't have made all that hinge on a man being in love with me. And that is the conversation that we as women need to be having with one another: is how can we provide for ourselves and still, fall in love, get married, have the babies, but do it in a way that protects our future. And my whole entire slogan is, "A man is not a plan." Like, he can fall in love. I have so many people who
Yeah.
are like, "This horrible woke feminist, you don't want anyone to fall in love and get married." No, that's not it. I want you to fall in love. I have found myself on this outside of this divorce in a new relationship, and I decided to be my own guinea pig, like working with family attorneys and financial advisors to create my Man Proof program, which I'll stick in the link. If you sign up for my 2025 wait list, you will get all of the free classes. We don't spam you. You can always unsubscribe to the emails, but that outlines the entire program. We'll put that in the description. My Man Proof Your Life program teaches all of this stuff that I talk about in all of my videos, and the stuff that I've implemented in my own life based on the experts that have helped me create it. So yeah, a man is not a plan. He's not your financial future. He can be your boyfriend, your lover, your husband, your bestie, whatever you want him to be, but he is not a dependable source of lifelong financial stability. Maven, if I can just mention one of the biggest things that we teach in that Man Proof class that I created, that I hear people talking about all over the place. I was on a family law live on TikTok here the other day, and she was talking about
Mhm.
the spousal trust. The spousal trust would have changed my life. You just have to go to an attorney, make sure that you designate an account as just completely the private, indivisible property of the spouse who's not working, which is, in our case, would typically be the wife.
So this is a way to be a trad wife, and not have to work, because I mean, obviously having a job is one source.
There
There's a
should
solution if you don't want to work.
program in my Man Proof program, there's no not work. So either your partner's in your husband's business or you have a stay-home job, because it would have changed my life, but I still wouldn't have had retirement, and at some point I would have run out of money. But it would have made my divorce much easier. So we don't have in my Man Proof program any option to not. Every adult human being, unless you're handicapped, should have a means of income from adulthood until you die. So we don't have
No,
that being
I
a
wanna kinda jump in real quick on that, and that often kinda ends up happening anyways. There's a reason why, like, in Utah, like MLMs, I
yeah.
know it's not just Mormons, we're really good at the MLMs, but it's everywhere, and it's because just a lot of times women either need that outlet or they need more income, like the one income is not doing it, and a lot of those programs are very predatory, and you're just a stay-at-home mom is really a prime target a lot of times to lose money, honestly, in some of these kind of schemes with this idea of, getting money. So you're going to have to anyway. I just wanna say there's a really good chance that you are going to have to work anyway. So go ahead. Sorry.
You take time off for your kids. Yeah, take time off. But we don't have any type of like there's no parameters within the program for you never to financially support yourself. You may not have as much money as your husband, or maybe you make more than your husband. Maybe he takes time off for the kids. Maybe you take time off. Maybe you guys share that. So we don't have any parameters for not working. But with that spousal trust, a bare minimum of $250 a month that goes into the spousal IRA. That's $3,000 a year. At $500 a month, you're looking at $6,000 a year. So in my marriage, if my husband had just, am I doing the math right? If my husband had put away just $250 a month for me, after 24 years, I would have walked away with $72,000. If he had done the $500 a month spousal trust for me, I would have walked away with 120 something thousand dollars. I wouldn't have been homeless. I would have had the money to provide for my kids, get them through high school while I figured out college, some type of job training for myself so that I could go back to school. And I work with people who are already married, who find themselves in these traditional families, and for whatever reason, it's not working. And the women often will watch stuff online and then they're like, I'm afraid that I'm going to get screwed if he ever leaves me. So then they reach out to me and do my Man Proof Your Life program. So I'm helping a lot of women who are in this situation, who are just trying to massage things and tweak things just a little bit. And they're always resistant about the spousal trust. Like, my family can barely afford anything every month, so we can't afford an extra $250. We recommend at least $500 a month going into that spousal trust. And say to that is, if you cannot afford that, then you shouldn't have gotten married, and you shouldn't have kids. When you're getting married, if you have that conversation, I'm going to give up my work for a while, cut myself out of, career advancement, and just lose money by staying home and raising the kids. I need this insurance policy. I need the spousal trust. $500 a month would be the ideal, so that I have a little nest egg, that I'm not dependent on alimony and child support on the other side, or if something happens to you, so that I have that little
Right.
nest egg of my own. Um, I think that if you have that conversation with somebody that you are considering marrying, or that you are married to and considering having children, that is your deal breaker. We as women can't enter relationships with men who aren't going to provide that spousal trust. And that should be universal across the board. I'm going
And
to
in
change.
reality, what you're asking is what the movement is supposed to be. The man is supposed to be the provider. You're actually having him do that, but in a way that he'll provide, beyond the relationship, whether the relationship ends or he dies and that income is gone.
I don't support men as providers. I can say that confidently because the data is showing that as women are building their own lives, decentering men, and creating, revenue for themselves so that they can buy their own homes and have their own independence and autonomy, they're happier. They're much happier. And the men are over here trying to figure out what to do with it. Like, women don't care about us anymore. Was it 60% of men say that they're unhappily single right now?
I
It's
know the
definitely.
statistics for single women are quite good, and that matches my experience. It does bother me that life is so much harder for mothers, and I just wish we lived in a better society that really supported all of us. I know, like, our cultures villainize authenticity so much as selfishness, and I have to say I've never been able and at a capacity to care more and uh, have more like full relationships and just helping out than like outside of that. Now that I don't have all that pressure, like I'm free to actually love and take that in and give it out, and I want that for everybody else.
Agreed.
Thank you so much for coming on my show. Yeah, we'll have all the links in the description. Again, it's not about hating men. It's not about hating the lifestyle. It's about protecting yourself and, you know, living living your values even better. We want you to have everything that you want to have. We just know some things in the background, I guess, that are pitfalls and that might prevent you from getting that. So anyway, thanks everyone for coming. Go ahead and like put in the comments like what have been your experiences with this, and check out Life Take Two. Thanks everybody. Thanks Jenny.